Hey guys, tonight we travel all the way back, like way back to 8000 BCE. Picture this. You're waking up, not under the stars or under a damp hide tent, but inside something solid, dusty and suspiciously permanent. A home, if you can even call it that. The walls are clay, the air is thick with the scent of damp earth and wood smoke, and the gentle light creeping through the doorway catches on the straw stuck in your hair. Outside, a slow, golden dawn seeps over the endless flat plain of the Fertile Crescent. Somewhere a dog is barking, sheep are grumbling, and someone else's kid is already crying. You can't remember the last time you woke up in exactly the same place 2 days in a row, and you're not sure if you like it. Your muscles ache, not from hunting a wild aurochs or scrambling over rocky hills, but from hauling mud. The soft shuffling of feet on packed dirt signals the start of another day in the world's newest experiment, village life. No, this isn't some vacation. This is your new full-time reality. You blink away the sleep, brush the dust off your mat, and sigh as you realize you've officially settled down. Your ancestors might not recognize you. You're not sure you'd recognize yourself. Tonight, we're going to live through the very first days and years of permanent human settlement. We'll figure out if this grand new idea, living in one spot, growing food and building homes, was really the upgrade everyone thinks, or if it was one gigantic mud brick mistake. Honestly, you probably won't survive this, but hey, at least you'll get a front row seat to the messiest, muddiest plot twist in human history. So do you think settling down was our best move, or our worst? Drop your location and local time in the comments to join our global village. Don't wander off. The adventure starts right now. Good luck. And remember, at least you don't have to build your own toilet. The story begins before your eyes even open, with a tickle in your nose and the faintest hum of flies swirling in a sunbeam. You're lying on a pile of reeds and woven grass, pressed close to the packed earth floor. Instead of birdsong and the snap of twigs, sounds you grew up listening for as clues to danger. What greets your ears is the soft mumbling of voices through a thin wall. The voices aren't far away. In fact, they're always there, because this wall is new, and it's much thinner than you wish. On the other side, a neighbor sneezes. You resist the urge to respond back in the old days. Sneezing was a warning that someone had caught a chill. Now it's just a fact of life. Welcome to your new normal. You force yourself up. Your spine cracks. Another reminder that sleeping on woven mats isn't quite the same as sleeping on a patch of soft moss under the stars. Dust floats in the golden light, making your nose itch again. You fumble for your sandals if you're lucky enough to have any. Let's be honest. Most mornings, you just hope not to step on another beetle. The room you share with your family is little more than a box. 4 mud brick walls, a thatched roof, one doorway covered by a hanging reed mat that does almost nothing to keep the cold or the mosquitoes out. Your entire world is within arm's reach. A pile of cracked pottery, the family's battered grinding stone, a bundle of dried grain, and a woven basket holding a handful of barley. Everything you own is visible, and everything you own is dusty. Even your dreams have a thin coat of silt. As you duck outside, you nearly collide with your cousin, who's been tasked with feeding the goats. Careful, she grumbles. If you let one out, you're catching it. She's joking, mostly. But you both know the last time a goat escaped, it took the entire village to corner it. Goats, you've learned, the Houdinis of the animal kingdom. Maybe there's a reason your ancestors just ate them instead of trying to share a bedroom. Outside, the village comes to life in fits and starts. There's a central path, really just a line of trampled dirt, flanked by a jumble of houses, some half-finished, some patched and repatched until the original builders would blush. Smoke rises from a handful of small hearths. No chimneys here, just holes in the roof that double as skylights and sometimes, unfortunately, bird entrances. If you look up, you might spot the morning's first scavenger bird, perched on someone's wall, eyeing a chunk of bread left to dry in the sun. You blink in the dawn's chilly light, and your mind drifts back. Only a few years ago, your family was always moving. You followed the seasons, trailed the herds, picked wild roots, and camped under whatever shelter the world gave you. Every morning meant something new, a different river to cross, a new berry patch to find, a fresh set of animal tracks to follow. There was danger, sure, wolves, snakes, starvation, the occasional stampede, but at least there was variety. Now, you wake up every day to the same clump of houses, the same muddy yard, the same cranky neighbors. It's cozy, or is it claustrophobic? Even you aren't sure. Someone shouts from across the village, probably one of the elders, or maybe just your uncle, who thinks he's in charge because he was the first to stack 2 mud bricks in a row without dropping them. You see people stepping out, stretching, gathering around last night's embers to warm their hands and mutter about how cold their feet are. The aroma of last night's lentil stew hangs in the air, mixed with wood smoke and the less pleasant smell of animals who are, let's say, not very good at picking one bathroom spot. You try not to think about the time someone mistook a pile of goat dung for a clump of dates. Lesson learned, always sniff before you snack. This place, the first village, isn't glamorous. There are no paved streets, no markets, no actual privacy. You're always on top of each other, literally and figuratively. If someone snores, you all hear it. If someone burns the bread, everyone gets to savor the disappointment. On the plus side, you haven't been chased by a lion in months. On the downside, the local gossip is nearly as vicious. You can almost pinpoint the exact moment things changed. It wasn't dramatic, no mystical prophecy, no epic leader. One day, someone noticed that wild barley grew in thick clumps on the riverbank. Someone else realized, hey, what if we helped it along, made it easier to collect, and so began the world's first farming experiment. Right here on these muddy plains. With that, you traded the freedom of the hunt for the certainty, well, hope of a future harvest. The early settlers, your parents and their friends, were both excited and nervous. This was a bold leap. No more endless wandering, no more carrying everything on your back. Instead, you would build a home. You would plant. You would wait. And as it turns out, you would wait a lot. You would wait for the rain, for the crops, for the animals to come home, for the roof not to leak. You would wait for something exciting to happen, which most days is asking a lot. This new life is less live fast, die young, and more live slow, worry constantly about mold. This morning, as you pad toward the river, you're greeted by a chorus of bleating sheep and the bark of one ancient toothless dog who still thinks he's a wolf. A neighbor tosses you a cracked jug. "Fetch water," she asks. Not quite a request. You sigh and trudge down the muddy path, feet squelching in puddles that never quite dry. The river is just out of sight, winding its way through reeds and tall grass. You're half listening for the telltale splash of a crocodile. Just because you've moved in doesn't mean the wild has moved out. The walk is short, but it's your time to think. You think about the pros. You always know where you're going to sleep. You know the faces around you, even if you wish you didn't. You have more stuff. Real, actual stuff. A pot, a mat, a stone knife. In the old days, you carried only what you could fit in a pouch. Now you almost need a storage room. But there are cons too. You feel a twitch of nostalgia for campfire stories and the rush of a hunt. Your legs itch for a longer walk, farther than the riverbank or the patch of fields at the village's edge. Sometimes you catch yourself glancing at the horizon, looking for the distant dust plume of a herd on the move, half hoping someone will suggest packing up and following them. Spoiler alert, no one does. You reach the river and dip the jug in, watching silt swirl up and tadpoles dart away. The water is cold, your hands are numb, and the jug is heavier than you remember. Maybe you're just out of practice. Or maybe you're feeling the slow, sneaky weight of this new, settled life. A rustle in the reeds makes you freeze. Is it danger? Something to hunt? Or just the wind? Turns out, it's only another villager, out for the same reason. You nod in silent, weary solidarity. You're all in this together, whether you like it or not. Healing back. You pass the first hints of the day's activity. Someone patching a hole in their wall, a group of kids herding ducks with sticks, 2 elders arguing over the size of yesterday's fish. The fish, by the way, gets bigger every time the story is told. By next week it'll be a whale. Breakfast is flatbread, rough and gritty, made from whatever you could grind up last night. Sometimes it's barley, sometimes it's lentils, and once, never again, it was a handful of crushed locusts. Someone swore were full of protein. You wolf it down anyway. There's work to do. Everywhere, the village stirs with new rhythms. People who used to roam miles a day now shuffle back and forth between doorways, fields, and the central fire. The daily to-do list is different, but the pressure is the same. Survive, thrive, and don't get in anyone's way. The novelty of a permanent home is starting to wear thin. But even as you mutter about the mess and grumble about your neighbours, you know something extraordinary is happening. This is it. The first page in the story of civilization, and you're right in the middle of it for better or worse. Most days it feels like worse. On really bad days it feels like someone's playing a prank, and you're the punchline. But there are moments, quiet ones, usually, like when the sun sets and the world glows gold when you feel a flicker of hope. Maybe this village thing will catch on. Maybe your kids will thank you. Maybe you'll look back and laugh about the time you almost packed up and left, just because the bread was extra chewy. Or maybe you'll just keep complaining, which, let's be honest, is the most ancient human tradition of all. So here you are, settled, squinting into the future, and just a little bit stuck. Welcome to the dawn of everything. Don't worry, there's plenty more drama, mud, and neighbourly mischief to come. You wake to the sound of someone cursing outside. Not a big theatrical cursing, just the muttered frustration of a neighbour, knee-deep in something sticky and regretting every life choice that led them here. You'd recognise that tone anywhere. It's the sound of someone building a home from mud, and today it's your turn. Let's not sugarcoat it. Building a house in 8000 BCE is, frankly, the absolute worst. Forget blueprints, power tools, or even the kind of wood that actually fits together. No, your toolkit is depressingly simple. A battered digging stick, your own hands, and if you're lucky, a few extra pairs of reluctant relatives. There's no YouTube tutorial, unless you count the neighbour yelling, "That's going to collapse," as you balance a lopsided lump of clay on top of last week's disaster. First, you have to get the mud. Real, actual mud. Not just any mud, either. It needs to be the right mix of silt and clay, wet enough to stick but not so sloppy it turns your walls into soup. The good news, the river floods every spring, leaving behind huge swaths of the stuff. The bad news, everyone else in the village needs it too. If you wait too long, you're left digging in the patch where all the sheep have relieved themselves. Pro tip, always check for hoof prints. You stomp out to the riverbank, a battered basket in one hand, your dignity in the other. The sun is already hot. The squelch of your feet in the mud is oddly satisfying, until you realize you've just sunk past your ankle. You wrench your foot free with a suctioning slurp that can only be described as prehistoric ASMR. Congratulations, you've officially lost your sandal for the third time this week. Shoveling mud into the basket, you quickly learn that it's a workout. Your arms ache, your back twinges, and the mosquitoes are relentless. If you stand still too long, they swarm you like you're the world's most disappointing mammoth. Every now and then you glance upstream to see if anyone else is having an easier time. Spoiler, they aren't. There's something comforting in shared suffering, at least. That's what you tell yourself as your neighbour wipes a muddy hand across his brow and sighs, "Next time I'm moving into a cave." Once the basket's full, you stagger back to your building site. The site is a patch of dirt, marked out with stones that keep getting kicked out of place by goats or toddlers. The area is just big enough for you, your family, and a lifetime of arguments over where to put the fire pit. Now comes the fun part, making bricks. The recipe is simple. Mix mud with straw, stomp until your feet are unrecognizable, and then slap the mixture into rough molds made from wood or even your hands. You try to get the bricks more or less the same size. You fail, but who's measuring? The sun dries them out quickly, but sometimes it bakes them so hard they crack, and you have to start over. The only thing worse than building bricks is rebuilding bricks. With enough bricks ready, you start stacking them, pressing them together with more wet mud. The walls rise slowly, painfully slowly. If you're lucky, they reach waist height before someone leans on one and sends the whole thing slumping sideways. You patch the gaps with handfuls of clay, muttering all the while about new house problems. Occasionally, someone from another household strolls by, offers completely unsolicited advice, and then wanders off to deal with their own collapsing masterpiece. Village life. It's one big, endless group project, but everyone's doing it wrong. Let's talk about roofing. No, really, let's complain about roofing. Thatched roofs are standard because wood is rare and you're not exactly made of lumber. You gather reeds from the marsh, tie them in bundles and layer them over the beams. If you have beams, that is. Usually it's more like a few long sticks that used to be straight. You work quickly because the sun is merciless and you'd rather not die of sunstroke before you get to complain about your leaky ceiling. Of course, no roof is complete without a hole. You need one for smoke, so you don't end up fumigating your entire family every time you cook. The trick is making the hole big enough to let out smoke, but not so big that it lets in all the rain. You attempt this delicate balance, only to discover on the next downpour that smoke hole and accidental skylight are basically synonyms. The first night you spend in your new home is a mix of pride and horror. Pride, because you made this. Horror, because the walls ooze damp, the ceiling drips, and something with a lot of legs has already moved in. You lie awake counting the leaks, listening to the wind whistle through gaps you could have sworn were sealed. On the plus side, the goat seems to love it. Days blur into weeks as you tweak, patch, and fortify your house. You add new layers of mud every time a rainstorm hits. You discover that fresh cow dung, spread thinly on the walls, actually helps keep the bugs out and keeps nosy neighbors from getting too close. Bonus: some people get fancy, decorating their walls with handprints or crude geometric patterns. Others just keep building until the walls are so thick you could probably withstand a minor earthquake, or at least an especially cranky sheep. It's not all misery though. The act of building brings people together. Everyone helps each other, even if it's just so they can borrow your digging stick next week. You swap tips, add more straw, or the bricks crumble, and commiserate over blisters and sunburns. You also invent the first construction jokes. Why did the bricklayer fall asleep? Because he was building a resting wall. Okay, they're not good jokes, but you try. The laughter echoes off mud walls and mixes with the shouts of children who have turned a pile of extra bricks into the world's most uncomfortable playground. Sometimes you look up from your muddy handiwork and catch a glimpse of the wider world. Rolling plains stretch away, dotted with wildflowers and the occasional stampede of terrified rabbits. The river glimmers, promising water and life, but also danger. Beyond the edge of your village, the land is still wild, untamed, and oddly alluring. There's a part of you that wonders what life would be like if you just kept moving. Inside your new home, you organize your belongings. A shelf here, a woven basket there. You hang herbs from the beams, both for flavor and to pretend the smell of wet mud isn't driving you crazy. The floor is packed earth, swept smooth by countless footsteps. If you're ambitious, you line it with more reeds for comfort. It helps, but you still feel every pebble and root beneath your feet. You take pride in the tiny improvements, a well-placed stone that keeps the wind out, a basket perfectly sized for your tools, a wall patched so well even your most critical aunt can't find fault. Though, let's be honest, she'll try. These little victories matter. They're proof that you can shape your world, at least a little. But the setbacks pile up. After the first rain, you discover a mysterious puddle in the corner. Is it a leak? Is it coming up from the ground? Did someone's goat sneak in again? You trace the source, patch the wall, and hope for the best. Spoiler: it leaks again. You start keeping score. House 12. The animals complicate things. Chickens wander inside, pecking at stray crumbs. Sheep eye your bedding like it's prime real estate. Once, a neighbor's dog took a nap in your fire pit. You start thinking maybe the old way sleeping out under the stars was less stressful. At least then, the only thing fighting for your spot was the occasional beetle, and then the big disaster, collapse. It happens to everyone, eventually. You're inside, minding your business, when you hear a gentle creak, a suspicious shifting sound, and then, boom, half the wall slumps inward, dumping a cascade of wet clay across your feet. For a moment, you just stare. Then you sigh, wade into the mess, and start shoveling. You're not even angry. This is just life now. Mud, patch, repair. On good days, you admire your handiwork. The house stands, more or less. The roof only leaks in 3 places, which is practically luxury housing around here. You invite your friends over, show off your wall art, stick figures, mostly, and boast about how your smoke hole lets out 90% of the smoke 100% of the time. You share a meal, trade stories, and laugh about the day you chased a runaway sheep straight through 3 half-built homes and into the river. The sheep still looks smug, but on bad days, you question everything. Why did we settle here? Why not keep wandering? Keep building simple shelters that you abandoned as soon as the weather turned? There's something exhausting about permanence. The way it ties you down, the way every crack and leak becomes your problem forever. You start to realize, when you build a home, you're not just making a shelter. You're making a promise to stay, to fix, to care. It's a heavy promise, heavier than the mud bricks you haul each morning. Your hands are always stained, your nails always packed with clay. You learn to ignore the little cuts, the constant aches. You also learn to recognize the different kinds of mud, the sticky, the crumbly, the kind that smells suspiciously like something you don't want to talk about. Each has its purpose, though sometimes you wonder if the best mud is the mud you never have to see again. As the weeks turn into months, you get better. Your bricks are less lopsided, your walls stay up longer, you start to understand how the sun moves across the sky, how the wind whips around your home, where the weak spots are. You patch and reinforce, tweak and adjust. You take pride in the moments when someone walks by and says, "That's a good wall." Even if they're lying, it feels nice. You're not alone in your struggles. Every household in the village has its own saga of collapsing roofs, muddy disasters, and unintended indoor swamps. There's a kind of camaraderie that forms a shared sense of, well, at least we're all suffering equally. You start trading tips, how to angle the roof just so, how to stack the bricks for maximum sturdiness, which kind of straw keeps the bugs out best. Sometimes you swap supplies, sometimes you swap jokes about whose house will survive the next storm. Spoiler, probably not yours. Still, bit by bit, the village takes shape. Houses cluster together, sharing walls and secrets. Pathways emerge where people trample the grass, and communal spaces appear, marked by the smoothness of well-worn ground. There's a strange beauty in it, the way each home is unique, the way the village feels like an extension of the people living there. Imperfect, lumpy, prone to disaster, but somehow cozy. And of course there are the inevitable show-offs. There's always one household that decides their house needs an extra room, or a fancier roof, or the village's only real door. You roll your eyes but secretly take notes. You can't help but want your own little upgrades, even if it means more work. Ambition is contagious, even in a mud brick neighborhood. Every now and then, you remember the old days, how easy it was to pack up and go, how little you owned, how light your life felt. There's a wistful tug at your heart, a sense of loss. But then, as you sit by your newly finished wall, watching the sunset turn everything golden, you realize you've built something more than a shelter. You've built a tiny corner of the world that's yours, even if it's mostly mud. That night, as you settle down on your woven mat, you listen to the village hum around you. The distant laughter of neighbors, the soft bleat of sheep, the crackle of a hearth fire. Rain patters on the roof, but this time the drips are just background music. You're safe, mostly dry, and dare you say it, a little bit proud. Sure, tomorrow you'll have to patch the west wall again. Sure, you'll probably find another puddle in the corner. But tonight, your home stands strong, and for a brief shining moment, you almost believe this whole settling down thing might just work out. Until, of course, the goat finds its way inside. Again, sunrise again. You're not even surprised by the stiffness in your arms anymore. It's almost comforting, like your body's way of reminding you, congratulations, you live in a house now. This is what achievement feels like. But as the muddy, patchy village stirs to life around you, there's a bigger, weirder project underway. A new invention that's supposed to change everything. Farming. If building your own home from mud felt like a comedy of errors, trying to grow your own food is an epic season-long slapstick routine, with the world's stingiest reward at the end. This morning you trudge out past the ragged huts, stepping over sleepy chickens and dodging a goose with a personal vendetta, toward the patch of earth your family now calls a field. That word field sounds so official. In reality, it's just a lumpy patch of churned up soil surrounded by slightly more organized mud. You're not the only one who looks skeptical about this plan. A few years ago, your parents would have laughed at the idea of trading a spear for a digging stick, of walking past a herd of gazelle to fuss over grains you can barely see. But now, here you all are, squinting at lines in the dirt, poking at clumps of wild wheat and barley, trying to remember which end is supposed to go into the ground. Your teacher is a neighbor who claims he watched the animals and studied the riverbanks, and therefore is an expert in all things agricultural. His demonstration involves tossing a handful of tiny hard seeds onto the earth, stamping them in with bare feet, and then waving his hands at the sky as if to summon rain. Everyone laughs, but then everyone copies him anyway. That's science. 8000 BCE style. At first, the novelty is exciting. You and your cousins kneel in the cool, dewy dirt, pushing seeds into furrows, covering them with a sprinkle of soil. There's pride in the symmetry of the lines, hope in the promise of bread that you didn't have to hunt down or dig up one root at a time. You almost start to feel like a real innovator, until you stand up, look over your handiwork and realize you've missed half the row. The sun climbs higher, the dirt gets hotter, and your back starts to ache. You sneak a glance at your neighbor's field where chickens are already making a mockery of his neat planting. There's a lot of learning going on here, most of it the hard way. The days pass, each one marked by the same slow, repetitive tasks: water the crops, pull the weeds, shoo away birds, patch up the fence, repeat. The wild world has not agreed to your plan, and the creatures that once ignored you as a harmless nomad now see your garden as an all-you-can-eat buffet. Every morning is a new battle. Crows swoop in, rabbits dig tunnels, beetles chew through stalks with the gusto of tiny lumberjacks. You and your family chase them off, yelling and waving sticks, but deep down, you have to admire their persistence. They've been surviving out here a lot longer than you. Sometimes, it feels like the plants themselves are plotting against you. Some seeds just sit in the soil, refusing to budge, while others sprout, stretch up, and then promptly wither. You learn the hard way that the timing of planting is everything. Plant too early, and the cold nights kill your dreams. Plant too late, and the sun bakes your crop into crispy straw. It's a delicate dance, and you're stepping all over your own feet. You experiment, because there's really no other option. Every family has a secret method, passed down from some uncle who swore he could talk to plants. Some swear by singing to the wheat, others insist on burying a fish under each clump. Your neighbor claims the key is peeing on the corn. No one invites him to dinner. You try it all, and half the time, the only thing you grow is confusion. Meanwhile, the weather is spectacularly unhelpful. The clouds that once seemed to drift by so gently when you were a wandering forager now carry the weight of your entire year's hope. If it rains too much, your barley drowns. If it doesn't rain enough, your wheat shrivels. You watch the sky with the intensity of someone waiting for a long-lost friend to return your favorite jacket. The clouds don't care about your feelings. Still, every now and then, there's a miracle. You wake up one morning to find a delicate shoot, green and fragile, pushing up through the earth. You cheer. Your family cheers, and even your neighbor, who hasn't spoken to you since you borrowed his digging stick and returned it shorter, offers a grudging nod of respect. You guard that sprout like it's your own child, fencing it off from chickens, shading it from the sun. When more sprouts appear, You start to believe in this whole farming thing, just a little. But not every experiment is a success. There's that one patch you water too much, turning it into a mini swamp that attracts mosquitoes and frogs instead of grain. Another spot refuses to grow anything except a mysterious plant that everyone is convinced is poisonous. But the goats eat it anyway. You make a note. Goats will eat anything. Probably even the mud bricks of your house, if you let them. Harvest time, when it finally comes, is nothing like the triumphant feasts you used to enjoy after a big hunt. Instead, it's a slow, fiddly process of bending over for hours, slicing tiny stalks with a chipped stone blade, bundling them up and hauling them back to the village. The grains are small, mixed with pebbles and chaff, and you spend more time picking out dirt than actually eating. Still, you get a strange sense of accomplishment from your pile of barley. It might not be much, but it's yours, grown from your own labor, rooted to the land in a way that's both new and a little bit scary. And then comes the threshing, which is every bit as glamorous as it sounds. You lay the stalks out on a flat rock and whack them with another rock, watching the grains pop out in a flurry of dust. The kids think it's hilarious. Your back doesn't. The dust gets everywhere. In your nose, your eyes, your food. You start to suspect that half your daily calorie intake is just inhaled chaff. Once you finally have a small mound of actual grain, it's time for grinding. You and your family take turns hunched over the grinding stone, working it back and forth until the grain turns into coarse flour. It's a thankless job, and you joke that this is why bread is called the staff of life, because you need a staff to lean on after a day of grinding. Your hands get calloused, your wrists ache, and you learn to appreciate the power of carbs. Forget the paleo diet. This is the barley and blisters diet. The final product, a small, lumpy loaf of bread, hard as a brick and just as filling. You all crowd around the fire, breaking off chunks and pretending not to notice the occasional crunch of grit. Someone tries to tell a story, but everyone's too tired. Still, there's something about sharing a meal you grew yourself that feels different. You're tied to this place now, for better or worse. But let's talk about the real enemies. Pests. If you thought chasing after rabbits and crows was a full-time job, wait until you meet the weevils. These tiny beetles have made themselves right at home in your hard-won grain stores, burrowing into every kernel and multiplying with enthusiasm. You wage war with whatever you can. Smoke, herbs, furious yelling. But the weevils just shrug and keep eating. At night, you lie awake, listening to the faint crunching sound of your future bread turning into bug food. There are few things more humbling than losing a battle to an insect the size of a sesame seed. The worst are the unpredictable disasters. One day, a sudden hailstorm shreds your young wheat, leaving you staring at a field of stubble. Another week, the river floods, sweeping away half your barley and all your optimism. Sometimes a heat wave scorches the earth until the very air shimmers. You learn to keep your hopes modest, your plans flexible, and your curses creative. Still, the community rallies together. When a family loses a crop, neighbors pitch in with what little they can spare. You trade extra beans for a few onions, swap a handful of barley for some wild honey. It's not charity exactly. It's survival. If one person fails, everyone's in trouble. You begin to appreciate the strength in numbers, even if those numbers also include the world's nosiest grandmothers. There's no getting around it. Farming is hard, repetitive, and more than a little discouraging. You can't just pack up and leave when things go wrong. You're committed now, rooted like your barley, hoping for a better harvest next year. You start to miss the old days, when you could chase your food instead of waiting and worrying for months. Back then, a bad day meant an empty stomach. Now it could mean an empty year, but slowly, patterns emerge. You learn the land, where the soil is rich, where the sun hits just right, how to read the clouds for hints of rain. You notice which crops survive the worst weather and which ones are not worth the trouble. You develop new skills, invent new tools, a slightly sharper blade, a better basket, a scarecrow made from old mats. You laugh when the crows perch right on top of the scarecrow and stare at you unimpressed. Your family changes too. The kids who once wandered free now learn to weed and water. Grandparents become the keepers of seeds, the holders of hard-won knowledge. You realize that your new way of life means sharing stories not about the next campsite, but about the best way to dry wheat or keep a mouse out of the pantry. Tradition shifts right before your eyes. Still, there are days when you stare at the fields, at the lines of green pushing up through brown dirt, and wonder if this was a mistake. Was it worth trading freedom for a handful of grain? Are you building a future, or just building walls around your own hunger? As the sun dips low and the world turns gold, you gather with your neighbors at the edge of the fields. You trade stories of your triumphs and disasters, joke about the time someone tried to plant wild onions and ended up with a patch full of angry bees. You watch the kids chase each other between rows of wheat, their laughter echoing across the plain. For a moment you feel hope. Maybe next year will be easier. Maybe the world will finally cooperate. Or maybe the crows will win again. Either way, tomorrow you'll be out here at dawn, digging, planting, hoping, because that's what farmers do, even when they're still not sure why. You wipe the sweat from your brow and glance at the field. Another day, another round of watering, weeding, and cursing at crows. It's getting old. You weren't made for this. None of you were. Your ancestors would have laughed themselves silly at the thought of you spending hours in the dirt, guarding a barley patch like it's the world's last bit of gold, and you're starting to see their point. It happens quietly at first. A little voice in your head, mumbling between chores while you grind grain or patch yet another leak in the house. Is this it? Is this what all the fuss was about? You traded the thrill of the chase for this. Welcome to the birth of boredom. Back when life was all running, foraging, and ducking behind rocks from saber-toothed cats, you didn't have time to be bored. Every sunrise brought a new adventure or a new disaster, but at least it was something. One day, you would be following a herd across the hills. The next you'd be huddled in a cave, hoping the rain would stop before your firewood ran out. Sure, it was exhausting. Sure, you lost people along the way, but every day felt different. Every day mattered. Now, you wake up to the same roof, the same dusty yard, the same list of chores. There's a strange comfort in it, but also a gnawing sameness. Each morning, you stretch, rub your sore back, and trudge outside to a world that changes only with the seasons. Routine, you grumble, as you fetch water for the 10th time this week. It's just another word for stuck. You look around and see the same realization creeping into everyone else. The kids, once wild and rowdy, now shuffle between houses, helping with the grinding or sorting seeds. They play, of course. Kids will always find something to laugh about, but even their games are different. Less exploring, more imitating adults. There are only so many places to hide in a tiny village. The elders sit around the communal fire, swapping stories about the old days. You hear them talk about the thrill of stalking antelope, the taste of wild honey, the time someone outran a bear, or claimed to. You can tell the younger ones aren't sure what to believe. You really crossed the mountains in 3 days? A boy asks, skeptical. With just a spear? The old man laughs, shaking his head. Back then, we didn't even have this many problems. The adults chuckle. Everyone knows the punchline. Life was harder, but it wasn't boring. Your chores repeat with an almost hypnotic regularity. Sweep the floor, check the fire, haul water, weed the fields, fix the fence, grind the grain, patch the roof. It's not that these things are easy. They're not. Your hands are always raw, your back always aches, and the list never gets shorter, but it's all so predictable. It's not the work that wears you down. It's the sameness of it all. You start to notice small rebellions, people sneaking off to the river, looking for reeds, but really just staring at the sky. Teens climbing the highest tree, not for fruit, but for the view. Anything to see, something new. The adults invent reasons to visit neighbors, exchange gossip, or just walk the same path for the 100th time, pretending it leads somewhere different. You can't blame them. You've taken to talking to the goats, just for a change of pace. They're terrible conversationalists. And yet, You can't just quit. The fields won't weed themselves. If you slack off, the grain dies and everyone goes hungry. You're stuck in a system you can't leave, not unless you want to risk it all and wander back into the wild alone. That's starting to sound appealing, at least on the rough days. You find yourself craving the unpredictability of the hunt, the thrill of discovering a patch of wild berries, the taste of something that wasn't painstakingly grown and stored for months. Some evenings, someone brings back a few fish from the river, and for a moment, dinner feels like an event. There's laughter, stories, even a little singing. But those moments are rare. Most nights it's just bread, beans, and quiet chewing. The monotony creeps into your dreams too. You start having vivid looping dreams of grinding grain, patching walls, pulling weeds over and over, like a never-ending song stuck on repeat. You wake up tired, the work unfinished, the song still humming in your head. At least the weather changes things up. A sudden storm sends everyone scrambling to save the drying grain. When it floods, you all rush to dig trenches, shouting instructions and slipping in the mud. There's excitement in disaster, a weird relief in breaking the routine, even if it's just to save your hard-earned crops from floating away. Once the panic passes, you almost miss the chaos. Or you watch as the older kids start acting out, sneaking into the fields at night, playing pranks with the village's only goat, who somehow always ends up smelling like onions after. The adults shake their heads, but deep down, you know everyone understands. You remember your own restless nights, back when you could just walk into the wilderness if the urge struck. Now, you can't go far. Someone needs you. There's always work waiting, and there's nowhere new to run. The boredom isn't just about the chores. It's in the air, the way time seems to slow down, the way days blend together until you're not sure if it's spring or fall. You mark the seasons by the shape of the crops, the migration of the birds, the rare arrival of a traveling trader. You crave novelty. But novelty doesn't come to a place where everyone already knows everyone else's business. You do your best to keep things lively. The community invents new games, new stories, new ways to pass the long evenings. Someone carves a flute from a reed, and for a few days you all hum along to the tune. But then the flute goes missing, someone blames the kids, and the song is replaced by another argument. Even music, it seems, can't shake the dust from this place for long. Sometimes, you wonder if this is just growing up, if the thrill of life always fades, replaced by duty and routine. Maybe your ancestors felt it too on the long, endless marches between hunting grounds. Or maybe, just maybe, something fundamental has changed. You suspect it has. For the first time in human history, you can't just leave when you get restless. The land owns you now. The walls keep you in as much as they keep the rain out. Still, life isn't all drudgery. There are good days, when the harvest is plentiful, when a neighbor shares a new recipe, when you catch sight of wildflowers blooming at the edge of the fields. There are festivals too, small celebrations marking the turning of the seasons, the birth of a child, or just the end of a long week. You dance around the fire, eat more than usual, and for a night, the village feels alive, but the next morning, it's back to the grind. Literally. You try to spice things up. Maybe you plant a secret patch of beans, hoping for a surprise. Maybe you build a new tool, just to see if it helps. The smallest victories feel huge. A bigger loaf of bread, a sturdier roof, a joke that makes everyone laugh. You learn to savor these moments, because they're rare. Your relationships change too. In the old days, you'd meet new faces with every season, trade stories, swap goods, maybe even start a new life with another group. Now you see the same people every day, in every possible mood. You know who snores, who tells the best stories, who's hopeless at milking goats. Familiarity breeds affection, but also frustration. Tiny annoyances grow bigger with every passing week. You learn to keep the peace, or at least to keep your complaints quiet. There are arguments. Sure, some days you can't stand your family. Some days you can't stand yourself. The walls feel closer, The village smaller, the air thicker, but then someone makes a joke. The child giggles, or the sunset paints the sky in colors you didn't know existed, and the world feels okay again. Still, you dream of running, of hunting, of waking up somewhere new, of a time before boredom, when every sunrise meant possibility. You wonder if your children will feel the same, or if they'll grow up thinking this is just how life is, safe, stable, and endlessly, exhaustingly the same. One night you lie awake, listening to the quiet village breathe. There's a peace in it, a rhythm that's both comforting and suffocating. You watch the moon drift across the sky, thinking about the hunters who once chased it across the plains. You wonder what they'd make of you, tucked into your mud brick house, dreaming of wild places. Maybe you'd envy each other, in your own ways. Maybe you'd trade places for a day, one craving safety, the other craving freedom. Or maybe you'd both just complain about the mosquitoes. You roll over, pull your blanket tighter, and promise yourself tomorrow will be different. You'll try a new recipe. You'll invent a new game. You'll sneak away to the river, just for a change of view. It's not much, but it's something. You close your eyes, drifting into dreams of distant hills and starry skies, knowing that come morning, the grind will begin again. But for now, you let yourself remember what it felt like to be wild and hope, just a little, that some of that wildness still lingers in you. Tomorrow, you'll get up, you'll work the fields, you'll tell yourself it's all worth it. You'll laugh at the same old jokes, eat the same old bread, and try not to think too hard about what you're missing, because this is your life now. Settled, steady, and for better or worse, here to stay. You're elbow deep in a basket of barley, trying to sort the plump golden grains from the stones and shriveled bits, when your stomach grumbles so loudly that even the neighbor's kid snickers. It's that time of day again, the hour when the whole village's attention turns to the food stores. For the first time in your life, what's for dinner isn't just a daily question, it's a collective obsession, and you're about to learn that sharing food and fighting over it is the heartbeat and the headache of this new settled world. Back in your wandering days, meals were catch as catch can, roots you dug up, berries you stumbled upon, whatever animal you managed to outwit or, let's be honest, trip over. Everyone shared what they had, because you never knew when the next meal would arrive, or if it would arrive at all. Generosity wasn't just virtue, it was insurance. Hoarding food in a nomadic group was about as smart as hoarding sand in a rainstorm, pointless and kind of suspicious. Now things are different. This is the age of the communal grain store. Picture a big clay jar, half as tall as you are, buried up to its rim in the coolest corner of your family's home. Next to it there's another one, and another, each one filled with the painstakingly harvested, threshed and guarded bounty of the past season. There's a similar setup in every house, plus a few larger pits and communal bins at the center of the village, where the elders say every family must contribute their share. It sounds noble, until you see the arguments begin. It starts small. Someone, usually the uncle with the suspiciously large appetite, accuses another family of not contributing enough to the store. "I saw your wheat, Tarek." "There's no way that little Patch gave you 2 sacks, Tarek." Bristling, retorts. "Maybe if you spent less time hunting and more time weeding, you'd have sacks too." You see the look, sideways glances, counting sacks, whispering about who might be holding back a secret stash. It's the first time you realize that wealth isn't just about what you have, but about what you're willing to share, or not. At mealtimes, everyone comes together, but not quite together. Sure, there's a central fire, and on feast days you all bring a bowl or two to share. Lentils, stewed greens, flatbread so tough they could double as doorstops. But most days you eat with your own. Still, food is always on everyone's mind. You trade with neighbors, a basket of beans for a handful of onions, a cup of honey for an extra loaf. Some days the haggling is half the fun. Other days, it's enough to make you wish you could live on sunlight. But the real drama unfolds when the stores run low. It's never even, never fair. One year, your patch yields barely enough to get through winter. The next, the family 3 houses down, can barely fit their barley into their storage pit. Someone starts a rumor that the lucky family is hiding grain, waiting for prices or, as they say, friendship to improve. Soon everyone's watching everyone else's baskets. If you want to spark a debate that lasts all night, just mention the phrase fair share and watch the fireworks. And then there's spoilage. You learn fast that storing food isn't as simple as tossing it in a jar and forgetting it. Moisture creeps in, and suddenly half your hard-earned barley is sprouting fuzzy green hair. Or worse, you open the lid to find the world's most determined rats have tunneled through and left a party of shells and droppings behind. When that happens, blame is passed around faster than the bread. The elders try to mediate. They gather the heads of each household at the big fire, and there's much solemn nodding and speechifying. We are a village. We share. If one of us goes hungry, we all go hungry. It's a nice idea, but you notice everyone's eyes flick back to their own homes as soon as the meeting breaks up. Feasts, though, are something else. On rare occasions, maybe after a successful harvest, or when someone traps a boar, you have a real feast. The news spreads fast, and people gather in anticipation, each bringing a dish. It's less Iron Chef and more let's hope there's enough to go round. Still, the excitement is infectious. The air is thick with the smells of roasting meat, baking bread, and the earthy tang of fresh herbs. Someone always tries to sneak a bite before the meal begins, but the communal scolding is swift and merciless. The children swarm the platters, eyes wide, hands faster than their manners. The adults swap stories, laughing and joking, the sense of community stronger than any single meal. For a few hours the tension fades, replaced by something like old camaraderie. You remember the old ways, the joy of sharing around a campfire, and wonder if this is what you've gained, or just a memory in new clothes. Yet, beneath the laughter, there's always calculation. Who brought the most? Who barely contributed? Who's eating more than their share? You try not to notice, but the glances are impossible to miss. Every feast is part celebration, part social accounting. It's a balancing act too generous, and you risk running out too stingy, and you risk isolation. Sometimes, the disputes get out of hand. A child is caught sneaking an extra handful of figs. An adult is seen walking away from the communal store a little too quickly. Accusations fly, voices rise. Once, a fight nearly breaks out over a missing sack of beans, and for a moment, you see just how thin the line between plenty and hunger really is. The elders step in, and peace returns, but trust is harder to restore than a broken clay pot. You're also learning that food isn't just fuel, it's politics, it's power, it's pride. Families who can grow more, store more, or cook something special start to gain influence. They become the center of gatherings, their advice sought, their children's marriages considered more desirable. A new kind of pecking order emerges, as tangible as the lines on your own hungry belly. With all this sharing comes new rituals. The daily meal becomes an event, structured and measured. You develop customs: who eats first, who serves, what to do if a guest arrives unexpectedly. Answer: add more water to the stew. You invent rules for what can and can't be shared, what's reserved for festivals, and who gets the last scrap of meat. The rules are always up for debate, of course, especially when the food runs low. On bad days, you grumble that you've traded the hunger of the hunt for the worry of the storehouse. There's a kind of anxiety that creeps in, a worry that someone somewhere has more than you, or worse, that you might run out. You keep mental tallies, count the jars, check and recheck the supplies. You find yourself dreaming about wild apples, fresh fish, anything that doesn't require negotiation. The kids, of course, find ways to game the system. They invent stealthy snack runs, sneaking bread when no one's looking, stashing treats under the floor mats. Once you catch your youngest gnawing on a raw onion behind the house. When you ask why, he just grins and says, "Because it's mine." You can't help but laugh, if only it were that simple. But then there are the moments when the system works, when someone falls sick or loses a crop, and the whole village rallies. People arrive at your door with baskets, a loaf here, a handful of beans there. You remember the old rule, no one is left behind. These moments shine, proof that, even with all the bickering and suspicion, community still means something. You realize that the lines between sharing and fighting are blurry, always shifting, but always there. Sometimes the village gets a visitor, a wandering trader or a stranger from another settlement. You gather, eager for news, curious about their ways. They bring tales of other villages, other foods, new crops you've never heard of. Sometimes they bring gifts, a strange bitter seed, a new spice, a tool shaped unlike any you've seen. In exchange, you offer your best bread, your sweetest figs, your finest stories. The outsider's reaction is always the same, a bemused smile, a shake of the head at how much you worry about your stores. You hoard like you're planning for 10 winters, one trader jokes. Out there we take what comes. You bristle, then laugh, then secretly wonder what it would feel like to just let go, to trust the world again. As seasons turn, the sharing and the fighting become the rhythm of life. Harvest days are full of hope, lean days full of tension. The line between feast and famine is thin, and everyone knows it. You learn to celebrate the good days, forgive the bad, and try not to hold grudges longer than the bread lasts. But you can't help but notice the new stress. Every grain you put away is a promise, and every promise is a burden. Some nights you lie awake counting sacks, planning meals, calculating how long the stores will last. The safety you traded for the wild is real, but so is the worry. You realize that in this new world, survival isn't just about chasing down your dinner, it's about negotiating, compromising, and sometimes swallowing your pride along with your bread. And still, life goes on. You plant, you harvest, you share, you argue. The village endures, its stories thick with the taste of food. Food grown, food stored, food fought over, and finally food shared. You try to remember the freedom of the old days, the taste of something truly wild. Maybe one day you'll catch it again, a lucky rabbit, a patch of wild berries, a memory from before the village. Until then, you join the line at the grain store, bowl in hand, waiting for your share. And as you wait, stomach rumbling, you realize, in the end, you're not just hungry for food, you're hungry for connection, for fairness, for the simple joy of eating together. Even if it means one more argument over the last. You can tell the sun is barely up by the way the village is already humming, not in that peaceful birdsong sort of way, but with the low, insistent drone of people bickering, pots clanging, and goats complaining. At first you thought that settling down meant the end of chaos, but as more families squeeze into the patchwork maze of mud brick houses, you quickly discover new neighbors, new problems, and some days it feels like the village is less a community and more a never-ending family reunion with a bad seating chart and no way out. It starts with space, or, more accurately, the lack of it. In your old nomad days, if someone annoyed you, you just moved your tent a little farther down the riverbank, or hiked up a new hill until the sound of their snoring faded into memory. Now, your house is 6 paces from your mother-in-law's, separated only by a low wall and a thorny bush that in theory keeps the goats out. It doesn't. If your neighbor's roof leaks, you hear about it, usually through the roof, as water seeps from his wall into your sleeping mat. Congratulations, you've invented the world's first open concept living, whether you want it or not. Privacy becomes a rumor, a punchline. You hear every cough, every laugh, every argument through walls so thin they may as well be curtains. The first time you hear your neighbor practicing his goat calls at midnight, you wonder if this is what madness sounds like. The second time, you're not wondering anymore. But it's not just noise, it's stuff. Their stuff. Chickens wander over the invisible property lines, rooting through your grain or laying eggs in your fire pit. Someone's goat, which you're sure is part demon, finds ways to sneak into your kitchen at least once a week. Kids run through the maze of houses, shrieking and laughing, often forgetting which house is their own. You sometimes look up from your chores and spot a child you've never seen before, eating your bread like they own the place. You do the only sensible thing. You hand them a broom. As the village grows, so do the misunderstandings. Whose turn is it to fetch water? Who left muddy footprints all over your sleeping mat? Who borrowed your grinding stone and returned it with a mysterious chunk missing? In a small community, everyone knows everyone's business, and that means every little slight, real or imagined, spreads faster than the latest cold. Gossip, it turns out, is as vital to village life as bread. The morning starts with news. Who's having a baby? Who's fighting? Whose daughter was seen talking to the neighbor's son near the edge of the fields? You pretend not to listen, but you can't help yourself. There's an art to village gossip. Just enough truth to keep it spicy, just enough exaggeration to keep it interesting. You quickly learn who to trust and who to avoid if you don't want the entire village knowing how badly you burned last night's dinner. But envy simmers beneath the surface too. You notice who's building an extra room, who has a new clay pot, whose sheep look especially plump. Maybe their wheat patch caught more rain. Or maybe they figured out how to hide the good stuff from the communal stores. Either way, you start measuring yourself against your neighbors, counting what you have, worrying that it's not enough, or worse, that it's too much and will draw attention. Theft, once unthinkable among a roaming band, now becomes an uncomfortable reality. One evening, you discover a chunk of your precious cheese is missing. At first, you blame the rats, until you spot the neighbor's son, lips suspiciously shiny. You want to be angry, but you remember the time you accidentally borrowed a handful of his family's onions. It's not malice, not really, it's survival, and maybe a little curiosity. Still, you promise yourself you'll hide your best food higher up next time, even if it means standing on a wobbly stool and risking your dignity. Boundaries are a constant negotiation. The lines between your home, your yard, and your neighbors are more suggestion than law. One day, you find someone's laundry hanging from your fence. The next, your favorite pot is being used to boil dye for someone else's wool. You have the same argument every week. Whose goat broke the fence? Who trampled the new barley shoots? Who left muddy sandals on your doorstep? There's a delicate dance of apology and accusation, of pretending not to care and caring far too much. The children are both the glue and the sandpaper of the community. They roam in packs, inventing games that make no sense, raiding gardens, and occasionally teaming up to build forts out of firewood and old mats. Sometimes they fight, sometimes they disappear for hours, only to return with wild stories and faces smeared with berries. You envy their ability to make friends and enemies with equal speed. Of course, there's also a growing sense of mutual dependence. When your wall collapses, it's your neighbor who shows up with an extra basket of mud and a look that says, "Don't make me regret this." When someone's child falls ill, the entire village gathers to offer herbs, advice, and, more than anything, worry. Disasters are shared, even if the blame is two. You learn the subtle social rules that keep the peace. Don't mention the time someone's bread caught fire. Don't ask about the missing chicken. Always offer help, but never too much, lest you seem superior. When someone is struggling, you bring a gift, but act as if it's nothing. "Oh, these onions? We had too many." If you need help, you hint. Never ask outright. "These walls are stubborn, aren't they?" is the universal code for "Please, for the love of everything, help me before this house falls on my head." Yet, for all the friction, there are moments of real warmth. On hot afternoons, families gather in the shade, sharing whatever fruit or cool drink they have. Stories are told, jokes passed around, and the village feels like an enormous rambling family. Sometimes, the old tensions fade into the background, replaced by laughter and the low murmur of shared hopes and worries. You realize, grudgingly, that life is richer with neighbors, even if they do have the world's most annoying goat. But tensions can boil over. One year after a long drought, tempers flare. Water is scarce, the crops are failing, and the line at the well grows longer each day. Arguments become sharper, voices louder. You see neighbors glare at each other over empty buckets, whispering about whose turn it really is. It only takes one person to accuse another of jumping the line before the whole village is swept up in a shouting match. The elders intervene, calming the crowd with reminders of harder times. But you can feel the fear beneath the anger. Scarcity makes everyone suspicious. There are also those awkward, everyday mishaps that only village life can create. You're halfway through grinding flour when a neighbor bursts in, wild-eyed, waving a beetle-ridden sack of beans. "Are these yours?" she demands, convinced you've swapped sacks. You haven't. But you know how this dance goes. After a few minutes of heated back and forth, you both realize the guilty beans belong to someone else entirely. You end up laughing about it eventually. But you also double-check your own sacks, just in case. You notice new alliances forming. Families who trade more with each other, kids who visit only certain houses, a quiet pecking order of who gets invited to whose meals. Sometimes you wonder if you're on the inside or the outside of these circles. You worry about saying the wrong thing, offending the wrong person, or becoming the subject of tomorrow's gossip. At least you can always blame the goat. Despite it all, life moves forward. The village keeps growing, inch by inch, house by house. New families arrive, often distant relatives or friends of friends. Their arrival is cause for celebration and suspicion in equal measure. You remember your own first days, how you were welcomed, then watched, then finally, slowly, accepted. The new families bring new problems too. Fresh rivalries, new customs that clash with the old, and always more children underfoot. One family insists on singing before every meal. Another brings strange-smelling herbs that make the elders wrinkle their noses. But with every addition, the village changes, adapting in ways big and small. Sometimes you miss the freedom of the open world, the way you could just walk away from trouble, sleep under the stars, leave behind old arguments. Now, trouble follows you home, and you learn to live with it, work around it, and sometimes laugh about it. There are unexpected joys too. The birth of a child draws the whole village together, a reminder that for all your squabbles, you're building something that will outlast you. Weddings, too, are grand affairs. Everyone invited, everyone judging the bread, everyone dancing badly, but enthusiastically. You realize that for all the drama, you wouldn't trade these moments for anything. One night, as you sit outside your door, listening to the familiar sounds, goats bleating, children arguing, neighbors singing off-key, you feel a strange peace. This, you think, is the real heart of settled life. 1,000 tiny annoyances balanced by 1,000 tiny joys. You're stuck with these people for better or worse. And most days it's a little bit of both. And if you ever get too frustrated, you can always blame the goat. You wake to coughing, sharp, ragged, echoing through thin mud brick walls and out into the chill air of dawn. You pull your blanket tighter, listening to the sounds of the village coming alive, the creak of reed doors, the clatter of a pot, and now more coughing. It's become a soundtrack to settled life. This wasn't something you had to think about in the old days, when your group never lingered in one place for more than a few nights, and every new sunrise was a chance to outrun whatever sickness was starting to brew. But now, with dozens of people packed together, there's nowhere to run. Disease has finally found a home. At first, nobody really notices the pattern. A sniffle here, a rash there. Maybe someone seems extra tired, or a baby fusses for hours, too cranky to be soothed by even the best old songs. Everyone shrugs it off. Just a little cold, someone says. Or, must be those damp mats. You think, maybe it's the weather, maybe it's the work, maybe it's just the price of living with neighbors who still haven't discovered what a bath is. But as the weeks pass, the coughs grow louder and the sniffles spread. You start to see the familiar signs: red eyes, fever, the slow shuffle of someone trying to make it to the well for water, but giving up halfway and sitting in the shade. Kids who were once wild and rowdy now sit quietly, listless, their cheeks flushed. A creeping worry settles over the village. You know deep down, this isn't just bad air or angry spirits. No matter what the elders say, there's something about living so close together, sharing water, food, air, even blankets, that turns small sicknesses into village-wide events, and the houses you work so hard to build with their sturdy mud walls and cozy warmth now hold in more than just heat. They trap coughs and sneezes, turning every home into an echo chamber of germs. The healers try their best. They mix herbs, burn sweet-smelling leaves, and tell you to chew bitter roots. Some remedies help, some just make you gag and question your life choices. You drink so much honey water you start buzzing in your dreams. The elders debate which old charms to hang over the doors, which rituals to perform, and whose turn it is to sit up with the sickest children. There's no shortage of opinions, but not much in the way of real cures. You think about the old days, how if someone fell sick, you just move on, put distance between you and the illness, give the body a chance to heal without reinfection. Now there's nowhere to go. If a fever takes hold, it runs through the village like a brush fire, sparing almost no one, and with everyone stuck in close quarters, it feels like you're just waiting your turn. At night, the village is quieter than usual. Laughter fades, replaced by whispers and the restless shifting of those unable to sleep through their cough. You toss and turn, listening for the telltale rasp of your own breathing, wondering if it's just your imagination or the first sign of trouble. You dream of running fast back to the wild fields and open sky, but you wake up in the same crowded room, the same damp air, the same uneasy stillness. Some try to keep spirits up. It's just the season, your neighbor says, though nobody can remember when the season lasted this long. Others are more blunt. It's all these people, too many in one place. You don't say it out loud, but you agree. This is the hidden price of settling down. The safety of walls comes with invisible threats. For every storm you avoid, there's a sickness that finds you. The children, mercifully, bounce back fastest. In a week or two, most are back to their old tricks, playing games, sneaking food, laughing at adults. But the elders and the very young suffer most. There are anxious nights spent beside the hearth, tending a fever, wiping brows with cool water, hoping for a sign of improvement. Sometimes, despite all the herbs and prayers, you lose someone. The mourning is communal, heavy. The village gathers to weep, remember, and share the pain. You add a stone to the memory pile, plant a tree, or tell a story to keep the person's spirit alive. It's a tradition that hurts, but helps. Other illnesses are more mysterious. Rash-covered arms, swollen eyes, the sudden ache in joints after a day spent in the fields or handling livestock. You begin to notice patterns. Sickness strikes hardest after the rains, or when the well is running low, or during the season when the flies are thickest. You suspect, but can't quite prove, that the water you haul every day, cool and fresh from the river, sometimes carries more than just silt and tadpoles, but water is life. So you keep drinking, keep hoping. Every family has a story. The uncle who survived a fever, thanks to a lucky batch of herbs. The aunt who lost her sense of taste after a bad cough. The child whose laughter is slower to return. These stories spread, like everything else, from house to house, woven into the fabric of the village. Some are hopeful, some cautionary, some just reminders that life has always been a gamble. Only now the odds feel a little less in your favor. When animals start coming inside for warmth at night, sheep, goats, even the odd chicken, you realize the problem is getting worse. The animals bring their own guests, fleas, lice, and the endless parade of flies. It's a cozy, crowded mess. You pick bugs from your hair, scratch at bites, and grumble about sharing your bed with both your cousin and a goat. But in the coldest weeks, no one is willing to leave the animals outside. The warmth they bring outweighs the itch. Most of the time, you notice other changes too. The village's first bath day becomes a kind of running joke. Someone's grandmother insists that everyone should wash in the river once a week to keep the spirits happy. The children groan, but the adults, itching, sneezing, coughing, decide it's worth a try. For a day or two after, the air is thick with the scent of wild mint and muddy feet. But by the next week, the coughs return, undeterred. As the years pass, the cycle of illness and recovery becomes part of the village rhythm. Each season brings its own challenges. Spring colds, Summer rashes, autumn fevers, winter chills. You adapt in small ways, airing out mats in the sun, drying herbs for medicine, keeping the fire burning just a little longer. Some in the village even start talking about the old days, before the coughs, before the endless parade of sniffles and itches. You know the wild wasn't safer, but it was different. At least you could run. Rumors spread about other villages, where entire communities have been wiped out by sickness, where strangers aren't welcomed for fear of bringing new diseases. You wonder if that will happen here, if the price of settling down is a future of ever-present illness. But what can you do? This is home now. The fields need tending, the houses need patching, and like it or not, the neighbours' coughs are your coughs too. And yet, you endure. Each new sickness is met with determination, stubbornness, and a healthy dose of humour. You joke about inventing a cough song, about starting a competition for the loudest sneeze. Laughter, you discover, is almost as good as honey water, and a lot less sticky. You look for silver linings. At least now you have an excuse to avoid that neighbour who always wants to talk about his wheat yields. There are real moments of community too. When illness hits hard, everyone pitches in. Food is brought to the sick, water fetched, chores shared. For all the friction of village life, you realize that together you can weather more than you could alone. You may share sickness, but you also share strength. Still, you wonder quietly, on long feverish nights, if this is what you bargained for. You dreamed of safety, security, enough food for winter. You didn't dream of counting coughs, of endless rashes, of waiting your turn to get better. You never thought settling down would mean inviting so many invisible guests. And yet, in the end, you do what people have always done. You adapt, you endure, you hope that next year will be healthier. Maybe, you tell yourself, one day your children's children will laugh at your stories about the great rash of year 3 and thank you for laying the bricks of their future, even if those bricks are sometimes just as fragile as your health. For now, you roll over, adjust your blanket, and drift back to sleep, to the soothing sounds of distant coughs and the faint, comforting bleat of a goat. Life goes on, for better or worse. The village breathes in and out, together, through it all. It's early evening when you hear the familiar clatter, hooves on packed earth, followed by the jostle of impatient bleats. The sun is dipping behind the edge of the world, painting the mud walls gold. You're standing at your door, arms crossed, watching as the village's motley flock of sheep and goats winds its way home. Only, tonight, they're not heading for their old makeshift pen outside the village. They're coming inside. That's right. After centuries of chasing wild herds, dodging predators, and treating animals like walking grocery stores, you've reached a new milestone: animals in the house. At first it's a novelty. There's a certain pride in being able to say, "These sheep? Yeah, I know all their names. That one's Clover, and the grumpy one who keeps butting the door, we call him Thunder." But as you usher the animals through the door, a process that is roughly as dignified as herding toddlers hopped up on honey, you start to notice the downsides. The first is the smell. Sure, you've always lived with animals nearby when you roamed. You even snuggled next to the dogs on cold nights. But nearby isn't the same as sharing your kitchen. Goats have an impressive ability to find the one thing you don't want chewed, and sheep, bless them, are like living, breathing dust mops. Within a day, your floor is a patchwork of straw, hoof prints, and unidentifiable stains. You start lighting extra herbs on the hearth, hoping the smoke will disguise the new aroma. It doesn't. Now your house smells like smoky goat with a hint of burnt rosemary. Still, there are advantages. Nights are warmer. With the wind howling and frost sneaking in through the cracks, you appreciate the cozy sheep-shaped heating units in your home. You all pile close, family, animals, and the occasional neighbor who claims they just came to check on things. The children are delighted, treating the goats as oversized, slightly smelly playmates. You draw the line when your youngest tries to ride a sheep around the room like a miniature chariot. There's also the sense of security. Out there, predators are always hungry, always watching. Inside, you can sleep a little easier, knowing your animals are safe from wolves and wild cats. It's a new kind of peace, even if it comes at the price of a little dignity and a lot of sweeping. You quickly develop new routines. Every evening, someone fetches extra straw, while another sweeps a clear corner for the flock. You rig up a crude pen using reeds and rope, and invent the first house rules for goats. No chewing the sleeping mats, no climbing on the firewood, and after one memorable disaster, no standing on the bread table. These rules are broken daily. But as days turn into weeks, you start to see deeper changes. The animals, once wild and wary, begin to relax. The sheep grow plumper, the goats get more mischievous, and you notice new behaviors. Mothers nuzzle their lambs under your roof. The goats form pecking orders with the family dog as a reluctant referee, and the chickens, always the drama queens, start laying eggs in your laundry. You realize you're not just keeping animals anymore, you're shaping them, and they're shaping you. There's a trade-off, of course. Animals indoors means fleas. At first you try to ignore the itchy bites. After all, you've survived worse. But soon the scratching is impossible to ignore. You, your family, even the most stoic elder, everyone is scratching, swatting and mumbling about the good old days of sleeping under the stars, fleas or no fleas. You experiment with all sorts of remedies, bathing in the river, briefly popular until someone spots a leech, rubbing pungent herbs on your skin, and even sprinkling ashes over your bedding. Nothing really works. The fleas have settled in, and they're not paying rent. Then there's the issue of boundaries. Animals don't respect them. No matter how carefully you try to separate people space from goat space, the lines blur. A particularly bold sheep claims your sleeping mat as her own. The dog and the smallest goat form a secret club under the table, plotting mysterious raids on your food stores. At night, you sometimes wake to find a chicken roosting on your pillow, staring at you with beady, judgmental eyes. And the noise. Oh, the noise. You thought a crying baby was loud? Try sharing a room with a goat who's just realized she's out of snacks. Or a sheep that's decided 2 a.m. is the perfect time to practice his bar in all 12 keys. There are mornings when you wonder if your ancestors chose wandering just to escape the racket, but you adapt, as people always do. You invent lullabies for goats. You build slightly taller barriers, which the goats view as a challenge rather than a limit. You learn that sheep, if left unattended, will eat literally anything, even that basket you spent 3 days weaving. You also learn the art of the midnight negotiation. If you stop chewing my mat, I'll let you sleep by the fire. Some neighbors complain more than others. There's always someone who insists their house never smells and their animals never make a mess, though a peek inside reveals the same chaos, just better hidden. The elders, who once scoffed at the idea of sharing space with livestock, soon become the most vocal defenders of the practice, especially when winter's chill creeps in. But as the months pass, you notice unexpected benefits. With animals indoors, you're closer to the rhythm of their lives. You witness births up close, the first bleat of a lamb, the careful nuzzling of a new mother, the excitement and mild panic when a baby goat arrives with more energy than common sense. You learn to spot illness quickly, to treat wounds, to celebrate the little victories: a strong, healthy calf, a hen that lays 2 eggs in one day, the dog finally earning the respect of the goats for at least an hour. It's not always harmonious. Sometimes a sick animal means sleepless nights, extra work, and the gnawing worry that sickness will spread, first to the flock, then to the people. You develop a new kind of vigilance, always watching, always caring, always hoping you can head off disaster. There are losses, and every lost animal is felt keenly. You remember the old ways, the freedom of walking away from a bad patch. But now, with animals depending on you, walking away is no longer an option. Food changes too. Milk becomes a regular part of your diet. You experiment with cheeses, yogurts, even that one failed attempt at goat butter that ended with the world's worst kitchen accident and a very greasy floor. The children develop favorites: fresh curds, roasted goat on special occasions, eggs cooked in every imaginable way. You trade with neighbors, comparing the size of your eggs and the creaminess of your cheese, each household perfecting its own recipes. Rivalries emerge: whose sheep are the fattest, whose goat gives the most milk, whose rooster is the loudest. Nobody wants that prize. And inevitably, the animals bring people together. When a cow gives birth, the whole village comes to watch, to help, to celebrate. Children learn responsibility by caring for the flock, and the adults swap stories and tips: how to soothe a fussy goat, how to spot illness, how to build a better pen out of whatever scraps you can find. Animals become a social glue, even as they chew through your last pair of good sandals. As the seasons turn, you realize you're watching something profound: the slow, stumbling birth of domestication. The wild sheep and goats of your ancestors, creatures that once scattered at the first hint of human scent, now crowd around you, nuzzle your hands, beg for scraps, and complain loudly if you're even a minute late to feed them. You're no longer just a hunter or even a farmer. You're becoming something new: a shepherd, a caretaker, a partner in a partnership neither side fully understands. Yet, for all the novelty, you sometimes miss the old ways. There's a part of you that aches for the simplicity of wandering, the thrill of a hunt, the silent companionship of wild animals glimpsed at dawn. Now every day is noisy, messy, crowded, and filled with the small dramas of village life: goat escapes, sheep squabbles, and the daily tally of missing eggs. But it's also warmer, more connected, and when you're not tripping over livestock, oddly comforting. You tell yourself you'll build a better pen next year, invent a foolproof way to keep the goats out of your grain, or maybe even teach the chickens to respect boundaries. But deep down, you know that this chaos and all is the new normal. Animals in the house, laughter in the air, fleas on your ankles, and the ever-present knowledge that you're making it up as you go along. Some nights when the animals finally settle and the village quiets, you find a strange peace in the chaos. You sit by the dying fire, listening to the soft snuffles and gentle bleats, the rustle of straw, the steady breathing of family and flock alike. It's not the wild freedom you once knew, but it's something else, a different kind of belonging, rooted not just in place but in the web of life you're learning to weave. One animal, one day, one midnight negotiation at a time. And if you wake up with a chicken on your head, well, that's just the price of progress. You're standing in the doorway, morning sun catching in your hair. When it hits you, you're surrounded by stuff, not just the usual mud, sticks, a handful of old tools, but an actual collection of things you've gathered, traded for, made with your own hands. In your old life, possessions were as light as a pouch on your belt and as fleeting as the river's current. Now you can hardly take 2 steps without tripping over a pot, a tangle of rope, or the latest treasure brought home by a proud child. Welcome to the age of stuff, and the first glimmers of what you might call property, clutter, and the peculiar new anxiety of ownership. At first you barely notice it happening. The old ways were simple. Everything you owned, you could carry. Maybe a prized blade, a water skin, a special shell, or amulet. That was enough. No one in their right mind lugged a heavy pot over 3 valleys or insisted on hauling a stone grain grinder up a mountain. But now, with a house to come home to every night, your relationship to things starts to shift. That battered clay jug that leaks a little, it's not trash, it's useful, even if only for watering goats. A chipped bowl, perfect for collecting eggs. A weaving comb missing 2 teeth, still better than nothing. And who knows, maybe you'll fix it. You start to accumulate. The signs are everywhere. A pile of firewood stacked just in case. A bundle of extra thatch tucked under the eaves. Spare baskets in the corner, one of which is mostly holes, but you're keeping it for repairs. There are fishing hooks made of bone, old sandals you promise you'll mend. A pile of sun-bleached animal horns nobody wants to throw away. And then there's the pottery. Oh, the pottery. What began as a few rough bowls quickly turns into a collection worthy of a village museum. Some are serviceable, some are lopsided, some have designs that look suspiciously like they were carved during a fit of boredom or a particularly long rainstorm. You have a favorite bowl, the one with the swirl pattern. Everyone has a favorite bowl, and everyone knows exactly who borrowed which, when, and for what reason. Family legends are born and die over the fate of a single pot. Stuff creeps into every corner of your life. You notice it when you try to sweep the floor and have to move 3 baskets, a broken spindle, and a rock someone swears is lucky. You notice it when you trip over a pile of spare reeds while carrying a steaming pot of stew, or when you can't find your knife because it's buried under yesterday's weaving project. Stuff multiplies, slowly at first, then all at once. With stuff comes storage, and with storage, new problems. Where do you put the winter grain? Where do you stash the smoked fish so the dog doesn't get it? Again, how do you keep the children from turning your best basket into a helmet? You try shelves, pits, hanging things from the rafters, but every solution has a flaw. There are moments when you look at your cluttered home and wonder if your ancestors had it right. Just carry what you need, leave the rest behind. But it's not so easy anymore. Things have value. Things have stories. That cracked jar belonged to your mother. That worn grinding stone, your grandfather shaped it with his own hands. Every object is a connection, a memory, a promise, a plan for the future. Giving something up feels like erasing a part of yourself, and so you hold on, even as the stuff piles up and the space feels smaller. Ownership changes how you see your neighbors, too. You notice who has the best tools, who's managed to decorate their walls with colored clay or seashells traded from a distant river. Jealousy stirs. Quietly, when something goes missing, a tool, a bowl, a handful of dried figs, suspicions run high. It's no longer just ours. It's mine, and yours, and sometimes theirs. But I saw it first. Arguments over property become a regular feature of village life. Who owns the new basket? Who gets to use the sharpest knife? Whose turn is it to use the family's only decent fishing net? You try to keep track, but sometimes, in the chaos of daily life, things go missing. There's the slow mounting anxiety. Did you misplace that stone blade, or did someone borrow it and forget to return it? Was it stolen? Is it just buried under all the other essentials you've hoarded? Disputes break out, usually with more exasperation than real malice. You try to be fair, but it's hard to remember whose shell is whose, especially after the children have been trading treasures behind your back. You invent new rules. Return what you borrow, don't hide things from your family. Always ask before taking someone else's stuff. The children roll their eyes, and you catch them breaking every rule before the sun sets. You notice other changes, subtler but just as real. People start to lock up their valuables, hiding food jars, stashing tools in secret nooks, inventing the first proto-locks, a particularly clever knot, a heavy stone, a sleeping dog trained to growl at anyone who gets too close. Privacy, once a foreign idea, now feels necessary. When a precious item goes missing, it's not just a loss, it's an affront, a mini-crisis. You miss the days when everything felt shared, but you can't unsee the way things are now. There are awkward moments too. A neighbor comes over, admiring your new pot. You can tell he wants it. His eyes linger a little too long, his compliments a little too effusive. You offer him a loan of your old, cracked bowl instead. The negotiation is tense, but friendly enough. You're both learning how to want, how to bargain, how to let go. It's clumsy, sometimes even funny, especially when a trade goes sideways and someone ends up with a basket full of onions and regrets. But with all the headaches comes creativity. With stuff you can make new things. Old pots become planters. Broken tools get turned into toys. You patch, fix, and repurpose until everything in your home has lived 3 or 4 lives. Children invent games. Stacking pots, racing spinning tops, building miniature houses out of broken shards and leftover straw. The adults, too, find ways to turn clutter into art. Someone starts painting their pots with red ochre. Another weaves colored string through baskets. A third invents a better way to store seeds in layers of ash. A quiet arms race of innovation begins. Each family eager to show off their latest improvement. The first time someone brings home an object from another village, a carved bead, a painted shell, a strange tool. You see the spark of trade. The object is passed from hand to hand, admired, examined, envied. A few days later, a similar bead appears in your neighbor's home. You realize you're not just keeping things, you're participating in a network of exchange, a web of objects and stories that stretches beyond your little village. The more you collect, the more you want to see what else is out there. But with each new treasure comes a new worry. What if it's stolen? What if someone breaks it? What if you lose it? Anxiety about your possessions begins to seep into your dreams. You wake in the night, convinced you heard someone moving near your grain store. You check the doors, pat the dog, whisper a quick stay away charm at the shadows, and try to fall back asleep. Sometimes you fantasize about clearing it all out, just walking away, taking only what you can carry, leaving the rest behind. The urge to simplify is strong, especially after tripping over your neighbor's borrowed basket for the 10th time in a week, but you never do. Each item has a purpose, a meaning, or at least the potential to become useful again. Stuff is hope in a way, a belief that tomorrow you'll need what you can't let go of today. Still, the burden is real. Moving house, even for a day, becomes a project. You need to pack up jars, baskets, tools, mats, and then convince the family that yes, we really do need to keep all those extra stones because you never know. Arguments break out over what to keep, what to toss, what to hide from the kids. It's exhausting, but strangely comforting. In all this stuff, you see your life, your work, your love, the story of a family learning for the first time to settle. There's an unexpected intimacy in sharing space with your things. You touch them every day, mend, wash, arrange, scold anyone who uses your favorite bowl for slopping the goats. They ground you, remind you that you belong to this place, this home, these people. For better or worse, you're rooted now, not just to the land, but to the things that fill your world. Of course, just when you think you've mastered the art of ownership, someone steals your best bowl. You spend a day searching, a night grumbling, and finally, in the morning, you find it outside, used as a goat's water dish. A little worse for wear. You shake your head, clean it off, and try not to laugh. In the end, it's just a bowl. But in that moment, you understand what it means to be settled, to care, to worry, to let go, and then to start all over again. And yes, you hide the bowl next time, just in case. You're standing ankle deep in mud at the edge of your barley field, staring at a pile of newly cut stakes and a mess of bundled reeds. There's a heated argument happening just over your shoulder. Your neighbor, whose goats are legendary for escaping, waves a stick, insisting his idea for the world's first fence is foolproof. You snort because you've seen those goats. But today isn't about goats. Not really. It's about something much bigger. You and the village are about to draw the first real boundaries. This is the day you build the first fence, and the day you discover just how complicated ownership is about to get. At first, nobody thinks of fencing as revolutionary. It seems so practical. The barley you've spent weeks coaxing from the ground is finally tall and green, waving in the breeze like a promise of bread and full bellies. But last night, a few sheep wandered in and trampled a row. The children chased them out, but not before one particularly bold ram sampled 3 different stalks and left behind his opinion in the form of a muddy calling card. So, the idea is born. A barrier. Something to keep out the animals. Mark the edge of your field. Protect what you've worked for. You gather with your neighbors at dawn, shovels and axes in hand, sizing up the task. The committee, which is just whoever's loudest, debates materials. Reed, thorn branches, whatever wood you can scavenge. Eventually you settle on a mixed thick stakes at the corners, wattle panels in between, and a healthy dose of wishful thinking. Building is chaos. No one can agree where the fence should go. You want it here, your neighbor wants it there. The oldest villager insists the stream is the real boundary, not the path. After an hour of wrangling, someone throws up their hands and storms off. 2 kids are sent to help, which means they end up sword fighting with sticks in the shallows. But the work begins. and soon the air is filled with the sound of pounding, weaving, grunting, and the occasional yelp as a thorn pokes through someone's palm. There's laughter too, the kind that comes from the novelty of the whole thing. No one's really done this before. You and your neighbor compete to see who can pound a stake deepest, who can weave a tighter panel, who can keep a straight line when the ground is anything but. Of course, by midday the fence has more curves than a river, but it stands. Mostly, you step back and admire the work. For the first time, the fields are enclosed. Your barley, your beans, your precious patch of wild onions, all protected behind a wall of sticks and mud. The goats give it a curious sniff, then try to eat it. You make a mental note. Reinforce the fence, frequently. The fence changes everything, though you don't realize it right away. Suddenly, what was once an open space is divided. People start asking questions they never bothered with before. Whose patch does this belong to? Who gets the water from that stream? If a tree falls on my side, do I get the wood, or does it belong to both of us? The simple communal world you grew up in starts to fracture, just a little. At first, it's all in good fun. You make jokes about trespassing goats, invent stories about magical fences that keep out not just animals but annoying cousins. The children invent games tagging each other out for crossing a line, pretending to guard the precious grain from imaginary raiders. There's a sense of pride in ownership, a new feeling of responsibility that makes you stand a little taller. But soon the arguments begin. Your neighbour's field sits higher up the slope, and when it rains, water runs down and pools in your barley. You ask nicely at first if he'll dig a trench to redirect it. He shrugs, says it's just water, and walks away. A week later, your best patch is a soggy mess, and you find yourself at the fence, stick in hand, arguing over whose problem it really is. The issue of water gets everyone's attention. The stream, once a shared source, becomes the heart of every dispute. When the flow slows in summer, families rush to fill their jars, jostling for the best spot. Someone suggests building a channel to bring water directly to the fields. Another suggests a turn system. Everyone gets a day, but trust is thin, and nobody wants to be left with the last muddy trickle. You realize with a sinking feeling that you've invented not just fences but the concept of rights, and nobody's really sure how to enforce them. You try to set rules, but rules are slippery things. Who decides where the fence goes? Who settles arguments? The elders try to keep order, but even they can't please everyone. One day, two cousins nearly come to blows over a disputed patch. The whole village gathers, voices raised, opinions flying. It takes hours, and several rounds of "if you two don't stop, I'll put you both on watering duty for a month," before peace is restored. But the tension lingers. There are practical challenges too. The first storm knocks down half the fence, sending goats gleefully into the beans. You and your neighbour spend an entire morning patching it, arguing the whole time about whose job it is. Someone points out that, in the old days, you would have just moved the camp. Now, you're stuck with the fence, and with each other. Still, the fence brings benefits. The crops are safer. The goats usually stay out. You can relax, just a little, knowing that your hard work won't be trampled overnight. You see the first real increase in yield, the first baskets overflowing with grain, the first chance to think about more than just survival. You start to see the fence as more than a barrier. It's a statement. This is yours. This is where your effort, your sweat, your hopes are rooted. It feels good, at least until you catch your youngest using the fence as a ladder and toppling into the neighbor's onions. Now you have to apologize and help replant half the row. There are social changes too. Fences spark new kinds of conversations, some helpful, some less so. You notice who builds tall, solid barriers, who settles for a loose row of stones, who can't be bothered at all. The ambitious families start expanding, claiming a little more space with every new row of posts. Others grumble, worried that land is running out, that their patch is getting smaller. You overhear the first whispers of fairness, the first hints of resentment. Trade changes as well. You trade not just food but space, labor, even fence building skills. I'll help you patch your fence if you share your watering spot. You can plant beans on my side if you help keep the goats out. New deals, new favors, new debts. Life is more complicated, but also more connected. Every fence is a negotiation. Every patch of ground a potential flashpoint or a handshake. But the biggest change comes when you realize that the land remembers. Each season the boundaries stay, even if the crops change. Children grow up knowing where their field is, what belongs to their family, what belongs to someone else. Arguments become tradition. Fence mending becomes a rite of passage. There's pride in keeping a boundary neat, in watching over your patch, in passing it down. Sometimes, though, the fence feels like a prison. You catch yourself staring at the wild hills beyond the fields, longing for the days when you could wander without worry, sleep wherever the stars found you. The open world is shrinking, replaced by fences and rules and an endless round of negotiations. You wonder if this is progress or just another kind of trap. You also notice the first signs of ambition. Some families start improving their land, digging deeper wells, building stronger fences, clearing rocks. Others lag behind, struggling with poor soil or too little water. Differences become more pronounced, and so do the arguments. You see the first hints of jealousy, the first cold shoulders, the first real grudges. And yet, when the harvest comes, you gather together on both sides of the fence. There's pride in what you've grown, in what you've protected. You trade, you celebrate, you eat together under the stars. The fences fade into the background if only for a night. But the next morning, you're back at it, patching, arguing, marking boundaries. You tell yourself it's worth it, that the fence is progress, security, the future, and maybe it is. Or maybe it's just another thing to fix, another problem to solve, another reason to shake your head at the stubbornness of goats and people. And as you chase a runaway sheep back over the fence for the 100th time, you can't help but laugh. Some things, it seems, will never change. You're hunched over the hearth, twisting a bundle of rushes into a crude mat, when you hear the unmistakable ring of a stone blade striking flint. It's coming from the neighbor's hut. Again. You smirk. That's Farah, the best toolmaker in the village, and these days she's always working. In the past, everyone did a little of everything, but now the pattern is clear. Some folks have found their niche. Welcome to specialization and the strange new world of social stress. It didn't happen overnight. Back when survival meant roaming, gathering, and hunting, you learned every skill you could. You had to. Your group was small. If you didn't know how to fix a spear, patch a shoe, or find wild onions, you simply went hungry. Everyone shared the same frantic curriculum, adapt or starve, but settling down has changed the rules. At first, everyone in the village pitched in with every job, building, planting, herding, weaving, gathering. As the houses multiplied and the fields grew, you noticed that some people just seemed better at certain things. Farah's flint knives are sharper than anyone's. Old Gillan bakes bread that's edible even after 3 days. A minor miracle. Rana's baskets don't leak, and the kids love when she weaves little animals into the sides. Pretty soon you stop bothering to make your own knives. Why struggle when Farah's are twice as good? You trade a mat or a loaf of bread. She hands you a new blade. You're both happier for it. Rana makes your baskets. You bake extra bread for her. The barter system spins up so fast it's dizzying. Some households become known for certain goods. The best pots, the strongest ropes, the softest mats. You start keeping a mental list. Who's got what? Who needs what? And how much your skills are worth in this tiny economy. It's efficient, but it isn't all sunshine and wildflowers. You notice the first ripples of resentment when Farah's family starts to eat a little better. Her knives trade well, and soon she's swapping tools not just for food, but for extra firewood, new clothes, even a favor here and there. How come the toolmaker's kids always have the best shoes? Someone mutters. It's half a joke, half not. Some people are slower to adapt. They do everything themselves. proud but struggling. Their bread is tough. Their mats fall apart. Their fields never quite flourish. When they come to trade, they have little to offer and less to bargain with. You feel the first flickers of something uncomfortable, a sort of invisible ladder forming, rung by rung. As the months pass, the lines grow clearer. The best toolmaker, the best baker, the best weaver. These roles start to stick, almost like surnames. You hear people say, "Go to the toolmaker's house," or "That family makes the blue-dyed cloth." Even the kids pick up on it, imitating adults, dreaming of who they'll become. "I want to be the firekeeper when I'm older," one boasts. Another says, "Not me. I want to make pots. The pot maker's daughter always gets first pick at feast days." With specialization comes reputation, and with reputation status. Some families sit closer to the fire at village meetings. Their opinions carry a little more weight. When a decision has to be made, like who gets the next patch of fertile land, or who is in charge of dividing the water, those with valued skills find themselves at the center of the debate. At first, you're proud to see hard work rewarded, but it doesn't take long for pride to curdle into envy. Little things start to matter more. Who got extra help during planting? Who borrowed whose basket and returned it late? Did the baker really use someone else's grain? Or was that just a rumor? Every transaction is laced with unspoken questions. Is this fair? Am I getting enough? Why do they always get the best end of every deal? A new problem emerges: favors and debts. With everyone trading skills, it's easy to lose track of who owes what. You try to keep a tally in your head: 3 mats for 2 knives, plus a loaf of bread and a favor promised during the last rainstorm. But soon it's a tangled web. Arguments flare over who's paid up, who's freeloading, who always manages to be busy when it's time to help patch a roof. A few families, maybe the luckiest, maybe just the best negotiators, start to pull ahead. Their houses are better stocked, their tools newer, their clothes brighter. It's not exactly rich and poor, not yet, but the gap is widening. You feel it when you look at the feast table and realize whose bowls are always fullest, whose children have the warmest blankets. Whispers grow. They think they're better than us. Just because she can make pots doesn't mean she's the chief. If I had half the luck, I'd be twice as skilled. Gossip and envy become new features of village life. They're not as loud as a goat in your bed, but they're there, seeping into every conversation. The stress isn't just economic. As people focus on their specialities, they lose touch with some of the old skills. The toolmaker doesn't know how to bake. The baker can't weave a basket to save her life. When someone gets sick or leaves, the village scrambles to fill the gap. It's efficient. Until it isn't. You notice social rifts forming. Children play in cliques. Bakers' kids, weavers' kids, herders' kids. When a big job needs doing, like building a new house or digging a well, the divisions slow everything down. Why should we help the pot maker? She never shares her best work. That family always gets help, but never helps back. Old unity starts to fray at the edges. Sometimes, the resentment boils over. There's a memorable fight one afternoon when someone accuses the rope maker of hoarding the best fiber. Voices rise, fists are almost thrown, and it takes the oldest elder to break things up. You watch as the community tiptoes around the issue for weeks, old wounds scabbing over but never quite healing. You miss the old chaotic, all-hands-on-deck spirit. Life felt more equal, even if it was harder. But as the months go by, you realize that this is the new reality. You can't uninvent specialization. The toolmaker's knives are too sharp, the baker's bread too soft, the weaver's mats too strong. Even if the system is unfair, it works. But there are good sides too. Life is easier, in many ways. The tools last longer, the baskets hold more, the bread tastes better, and breaks fewer teeth. People have more time for their own families, for rest, even for a little fun singing, storytelling, teaching the children games from before the village days. Some families become renowned beyond your village, their goods traded to far-off places, Their names known on distant rivers. There's pride in that and excitement. The village is growing up, becoming something bigger, more complex. Yet you can't help but feel uneasy when you see a neighbor's house fall into disrepair, when you spot a child wearing the same threadbare shirt month after month. You know it wasn't always this way. The gap between haves and have-nots isn't a canyon. Not yet. But it's a rut you can't help but stumble into. The elders try to keep things balanced. They invent new rules. No one can refuse a fair trade. Everyone must help with the hardest jobs. Feasts should be shared. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it just papers over the cracks. You catch yourself wishing for a simpler solution, but there isn't one. Specialization has made the village stronger and more divided. One day, a group of children come running, arguing about who gets to play the toolmaker in their game. You watch as they mimic the adults, bartering, haggling, boasting about their imaginary wares. You want to laugh, but something in their play hits a little too close to home. That night, as you share a meal with your family, you realize how much has changed. Your world is bigger, busier, more secure and more stressful. You're proud of what you do, of what your family contributes, but you wonder, what did you lose in gaining all this skill? What price are you paying just to eat better bread? You finish your meal, thank your neighbor for the sharp knife, and tuck your own child in with a hand-me-down blanket. Specialization, you think, is here to stay. So is the envy, the pride, the anxiety, and somewhere in all of it, the hope that tomorrow someone will invent a job that's just professional napper. Because let's face it, some days you're already doing the work. You spend the next morning lingering in the haze of last night's commotion, moving through your chores with a heaviness in your bones and a tension in the air that clings like dust. The village is subdued. Everyone's watching everyone else, as if a single sideways glance could reveal the thief, the liar, the person to blame. Welcome to the dawn of a new problem. Conflict and crime are no longer just stories for the old folks to scare children. They're woven right into the rhythm of settled life. You're old enough to remember when the worst fights were over, who ate the last honeycomb or who pushed whom into the river. Back then, a quick scuffle, a sulk, maybe a few harsh words, and the storm would pass. But this is different now that there's property, boundaries, and the sharp awareness of what's mine and what's yours. Every dispute feels bigger. Every accusation lands harder. Last night's outburst over stolen barley didn't just disappear with the dawn. All morning, neighbors circle each other warily. Whispers replace greetings. People move in clumps, side-eyeing storage pits and closed doors. You notice a few family heads gathering with the elders, voices hushed but faces flushed. Someone sharpens a stick a little more pointedly than necessary. Tensions are up, and they're not coming down anytime soon. Breakfast is quiet. No one laughs at the usual goat jokes. You chew your bread, listening to the news ripple through the room. Whose grain was taken? Who's being blamed? Who's got a suspiciously full jar of lentils? Who's acting just a bit too quiet? The kids, sensing the mood, go off to play at the edge of the village, inventing their own little trial with a lopsided mud court. One claims the other's clay ball, and before you know it there's shouting, finger pointing, and a wild performance of fake tears. You shake your head. It's almost too on the nose. By midday, things come to a head. The elders call everyone to the center of the village. No one wants to go, but no one dares stay away either. You gather in a ragged circle, waiting for someone to speak first. The oldest elder clears his throat. A signal everyone knows means, listen up, or else. He starts with the old words, this is our home. We share the work, we share the food, we share the pain. But even as he says it, you hear the weariness. Everyone here knows sharing isn't as simple as it used to be. The discussion is messy. The accused protests their innocence. The accuser insists they saw what they saw, and the crowd murmurs its agreement or doubt depending on which side of the invisible social fault line they stand. Everyone gets a chance to speak, and almost everyone takes it. Stories are told, fingers pointed, excuses made. You get the feeling you're not just hashing out one crime, you're dredging up old hurts, debts, insults, and mistakes from years past. Eventually, the elders propose what they call restoration. If the barley's found, it should be returned. If not, the accused can offer something of equal value: a tool, a promise of labor, an extra portion at the next meal. But that's not enough for everyone. Some want a harsher punishment. Others, quieter and older, suggest that it's time to remember the old ways. We're a family here. Let's not tear ourselves apart. After hours of debate, a compromise is reached. The accused family agrees to help rebuild the accuser's fence, which to everyone's surprise was also damaged last night. Coincidence? The barley is never found, but a few jars of grain change hands. Debts are quietly forgiven, and at least for now, open conflict is avoided. You walk away exhausted, but a little relieved. At least no one's sleeping outside the village tonight. Still, the incident leaves scars. People remember who stood by whom, who yelled the loudest, who was too quick to accuse, or too slow to forgive. Social trust, once effortless, now feels fragile. You find yourself watching your own stores more closely, locking up your best tools, making a mental note of who's been acting strange. It's not just theft either. With boundaries come disputes over land, over water, over who gets to use the best patch of earth. One family claims the right to a particularly fertile corner of the field, saying they've worked it the longest. Another insists it's been communal since the village began. Voices rise, sides are chosen, and before you know it, the fence between the two fields is knocked down by accident, 3 times in 1 week. You're pretty sure you saw someone's goat do it deliberately, but nobody asks the goat for comment. Sometimes, the disputes escalate. There are shouting matches, shoves, the occasional thrown handful of mud. Once during a particularly tense summer, someone is caught sabotaging a rival's water channel, plugging it with a wad of reeds. The culprit is found out by a child, who promptly announces their discovery to the entire village, like a crier at a royal court. The punishment? The reed stuffer has to dig and repair not just the sabotaged channel, but 3 others as well. Maybe now you'll think before you plug. An elder says, and everyone laughs, but only a little. Crime and conflict begin to shape the way you live. You start keeping better records, mental lists, then small marks scratched into pottery or wood. 1 tool lent, 1 basket borrowed, 2 loaves owed. You catch yourself hiding the best food, building secret cubby holes for your favorite knife or the lucky bead your mother gave you. Others do the same. Privacy, once foreign, is now essential. You guard your secrets and your stuff a little more closely every day. Justice becomes a regular part of village life. With every dispute comes another council, another round of debate and judgment. The elders grow more cautious, more formal, inventing new rules. If you take, you must give back. If you harm, you must repair. Some want harsher penalties, others argue for mercy. The children listen and learn, inventing new rules for their games, sometimes stricter than the adults. If you steal my stick, I get your shoes, one declares. That's not fair, shouts another. And so it goes. There are days when you yearn for the old freedom, when wrongs could be left behind with the rising sun and a new campfire. Now mistakes linger, passed from mouth to mouth, story to story. A feud that starts over a fence can last for seasons. Sometimes families move their houses a little farther apart, or stop sharing meals, or refuse to help with a community task. The web of obligations and resentments grows more tangled. You start to see the rise of enforcers, men and women who by sheer force of personality or sheer stubbornness are called on to break up fights, mediate arguments, or settle debts. Sometimes they're respected, sometimes resented. Who made her chief? Someone grumbles. Only half joking. There's no formal leader, but authority is slowly pooling around the people who are best at keeping the peace, or at least best at making themselves heard. For the first time, you hear talk of exile, the unthinkable threat of banishment. No one wants to say it out loud, but you sense the fear. To be cast out is worse than hunger or cold. It's social death. Yet the possibility hovers, a warning to those who won't play by the rules. You notice that rituals and stories start to change. Where the old tales used to be about outsmarting the wild, now they're about tricksters and thieves, about the value of honesty, about why a lie is like a snake. It always comes back to bite. At night, around the fire, the children are told cautionary tales about greed and envy, about how one person's theft can bring hunger to all. You hope they're listening. Through it all, you keep going. You learn to navigate the new landscape, part neighbor, part rival, part judge and jury. Most days, things work out. Someone apologizes, a debt is forgiven, a tool returned. The grain stores are safe, but other days, the air is thick with unspoken words and half-hidden suspicions. You realize that conflict is part of the new world. It's exhausting, sometimes frightening, but it's also proof that you all care about your work, your food, your families, and yes, even about the village itself. You patch up walls, rebuild fences, and when things are at their worst, remember how much worse it would be alone. And when night falls, you try to sleep, knowing that tomorrow will bring another challenge, another argument, another chance to set things right, or at the very least, to muddle through, because that, you suspect, is what it means to be human in this new era. Not just surviving, but finding a way to live together, with all the messiness, the drama, and the hope that things might get better. You wake before dawn, drawn from uneasy dreams by the restless murmur of voices in the next room. They're talking about the flood, the big one, the one that came 2 years ago and nearly swept the whole village away. It's become a regular topic of conversation now, like the weather or the price of beans. It seems every time people gather, someone brings it up. Remember how high the water rose? Remember who lost their whole harvest? Remember how many of us had to move our houses? It's more than nostalgia. It's a kind of collective reckoning. The new world of settlement isn't just about fences and food. It's about weather, water, and the sudden shared terror of disaster. It's funny. As a wanderer, you respected the weather, but you didn't really fear it. If the rains got bad, you just moved on. If the river flooded, you found a new camp. The world was unpredictable, but you could flow with it, drift, adapt, run. Now, you're anchored. You've put roots in the ground, and when disaster strikes, you can't just up and leave. You hear it in the stories, the storm that flattened 3 houses, the hail that stripped the fields bare, the week the river climbed so high it left fish stranded on your doorstep. People remember the losses in detail, how much grain, how many tools, which family had to take shelter with neighbors for a month. The memory of the big flood is seared into everyone's mind. We thought we'd be safe in our houses, someone says. But the river didn't care. You nod, because you remember too, standing in waist-deep water, clutching a basket of grain, watching helplessly as the hard work of a year floated away. That's the thing about disaster now. It's a community event. When one person suffers, everyone feels it. After the flood, the whole village came together. You shared food, rebuilt houses, even pooled the remaining seeds for replanting. It's not just kindness, it's survival. If one family falls behind, the village gets weaker. You can't afford to let anyone drown, literally or otherwise. But the fear lingers. Each season brings new threats. Drought that bakes the fields, sudden cold snaps that kill young plants, plagues of insects that descend like clouds and leave nothing behind but bare stalks and shell-shocked farmers. There are years when the rains don't come at all, when the river shrinks to a muddy trickle and you spend your days digging, praying, hoping for a thundercloud on the horizon. The drought is its own kind of disaster. Slow, grinding, relentless. It eats away at your patience, your stores, your hope. You learn new skills. After the flood, the village builds channels and raised banks, anything to steer water away from the houses. After the drought, you dig wells, deeper than before, and start collecting rainwater in jars. Every family becomes a little bit of an engineer, a little bit of a gambler, trying to guess what next year will bring. But it's not enough. Some years, no matter how well you prepare, disaster still finds you. A freak hailstorm shreds your wheat just days before the harvest. A sudden freeze kills half the newborn lambs. Once a fire starts in a neighbor's kitchen and spreads to 3 houses before it's put out. Each event is a blow, but also a lesson. You rebuild, you adapt, you try to learn. When disaster strikes, it tests the village's spirit. The strong step up, sharing food, lending tools, comforting those who lost the most. You see true leaders emerge, not because they wanted power, but because everyone needs help. The village learns to mourn together, to rebuild together, to find hope in the shared work of recovery. But the cracks show too. In hard years, old resentments flare up. Someone accuses another of hoarding grain or slacking off during the cleanup. A family that receives help one year is expected to pay it back the next, and if they can't, the whispers start. Maybe they're just unlucky. Maybe they don't work as hard as we do. You realize that disaster is more than a test of survival. It's a test of trust. In the best years, it pulls you together. In the worst, it pulls you apart. It changes your relationship with the land too. You start paying closer attention to the signs, how the clouds move, how the wind smells, the way the river rises and falls. The elders watch the stars, the flight of birds, the color of the sunrise, searching for omens. If the frogs sing late, one says, the rains will come early. If the wild onions bloom all at once, watch out for hail. You listen, you hope, you hedge your bets. But you know deep down that sometimes nature just does what it wants. You also learn to prepare in ways you never did before. Every harvest, you set aside extra grain, more than seems necessary. You build bigger jars, reinforce the storehouses, mend the roofs and walls again and again. The communal spirit, the sense that you're all in it together, grows with every shared hardship. You keep an emergency cache, a stash of dried beans, a secret stash of firewood. You whisper about it, sometimes as if preparing is an act of bad luck, a way to invite disaster by thinking about it too much. There's an anxiety to it all, a background hum that never fades. You're always waiting for the next thing to go wrong. A sudden illness, a wandering wolf, a fire, a drought. Some nights you lie awake, listening for the sound of rain, or for the silence that means the well is empty. You dream of running, of packing up and leaving, but you know those days are over. Your world is here now, for better or worse. But disaster also brings invention. You start to see families trying new things, planting 2 crops instead of 1, storing food in different places, building raised platforms to keep grain safe from water. One neighbor invents a new kind of roof, steeper, more resistant to leak. Another starts keeping chickens inside, away from foxes. Each setback is a spark for creativity, a push to find a better way. After a few years, the village changes. You can see it in the layout. Houses built farther from the river, wells dug deeper, fields split into smaller patches so a single disaster can't wipe out everything at once. You build a communal fire pit, a central gathering spot where news and warnings are shared. Someone invents a warning system. If the river rises too fast, a runner is sent from house to house, banging a stick on the doors. There are new customs too. After every disaster, the village comes together for a ritual meal, a way of marking survival, of saying, we're still here. You tell stories, sing songs, remember those lost and celebrate those saved. It's not just comfort, it's a way of binding the village together, of turning fear into hope, loss into renewal. Yet for all your planning, nature remains unpredictable. Some years are kind, gentle rains, fat crops, full bellies. You almost forget the fear, the worry, the hunger, but it never truly goes away. You know in your bones that the next disaster could be just a season away. The elders sometimes sigh, remembering the old days. When we wandered, at least we could run. But even they admit that there's a different kind of strength in staying put, a stubborn hope, a belief that you can shape the world, or at least survive its whims. You take pride in every repair, every improvement, every jar of grain that makes it through the winter. It's not just about you anymore, it's about the future, about building something that will last. Still, you know the truth. The land gives, and the land takes. For every year of plenty, there's a year of loss. The only constant is change, and the only way to survive is together. As you help mend a neighbor's roof after a storm, you catch yourself laughing at a joke, the memory of last night's tension fading for a moment. You look around at the muddy, chaotic, crowded village, the patchwork of houses, the noisy animals, the endless work, and you feel a strange kind of gratitude. Disaster is terrible, but it's also the thing that reminds you how much you need each other, how strong you can be, and how even in the hardest years, life goes on. You fall asleep that night to the sound of distant thunder, knowing that whatever comes, you'll face it side by side, anchored not just to the earth but to the people you've chosen, for better or for worse, to call your own. The days blur together as the heat of late summer presses down on the village. You wake earlier, sweating through your linen wrap, and hear the first of the animals bleating for water. By the time the sun's up, the well is already surrounded, cousins, neighbors, a fussy old goat with ideas about who gets to drink first. In the old world, you'd just wander to a new river or a shaded stream. Now the whole village lines up, waiting, watching, judging whose bucket is fullest and whose patience is thinnest. Resource management, you realize, is no longer just about knowing where the berries grow. It's become a careful, tense, daily negotiation, and everyone is learning what it means to be at the mercy of scarcity. Water is at the heart of it all. The well, once overflowing in spring, singing with frogs and lined with wild mint, now shrinks every day. A muddy trickle replaces the stream's cheerful chatter. The children squabble over whose job it is to fetch water, and the adults bicker over whose animals drink the most. She lets her goats drink twice. Someone accuses. He takes extra for the bean patch. You find yourself counting every drop, measuring every cup. Each splash is a tiny betrayal, or a blessing. It doesn't stop with water. The storehouse is suddenly a battleground. There's barley, sure, but will it last until the next harvest? What about beans, or lentils, or the stash of dried fruit hidden at the back of the communal jar? The elders gather, peering over lists, scratched into bits of bone and clay. They debate, should we share equally, or by family size, or by how much work each person puts in? The questions never quite go away, and there's always someone convinced the scales are tilted. You learn to ration. At first it's just little things, half a cup of grain instead of a whole, a thinner stew, a promise to make it stretch. Then it becomes routine. Meals shrink, treats vanish. You eat what you have, not what you want. The children learn quickly. Don't ask for more. Don't waste. Don't dream too loudly of roasted fish or honey cakes. Some days, resource management is almost funny. The children invent bean counting, a game where whoever can guess closest to the real number of beans in the jar wins the last dried fig. They take the job very seriously, peering into the jar with the gravity of future accountants. You catch yourself smiling. If only adulthood could be so simple. But most days, it's tense. When someone uses a little too much firewood or accidentally takes more than their share, the whispers start. Must be nice to have a father on the storehouse council. Someone mutters. Her cousin always gets extra. You can feel the pressure mounting, the invisible weights added to every decision. Even land, once an endless canvas, is now a resource to be managed. With so many mouths to feed, every patch of fertile soil is precious. Arguments spark over whose plot is biggest, who gets the shadiest spot, whose onions are encroaching on the neighbor's beans. The elders draw lines in the dirt, smooth them out, redraw them again. Nobody's happy, but the lines hold for now. You see ingenuity too. People invent new ways to stretch what you have. Someone starts saving seeds from the best plants, replanting the strongest shoots. The kids invent a way to scare off birds from the fields with bits of shiny shell and noisy rocks on string. Old Gilon, the bread maker, figures out how to grind acorns into flour, mixing them with barley to make the loaves last longer. It's bitter, but it keeps you full. Trade becomes a lifeline. You swap beans for onions, milk for eggs, a new pot for an afternoon's help mending the fence. The market is lively, noisy, sometimes cutthroat. Everyone is looking for an edge, a deal, a way to get a little more. give a little less. There are new rules for trade too. No cheating, no stealing, no changing the price once you shake hands. Most people follow them, most of the time. Still, trust is fragile. More than once you see someone accused of watering down their milk or slipping a few pebbles into the lentil sack. The market explodes, shouting, finger pointing. Sometimes a shove or a slap. The elders step in, settle things, sometimes ban someone from trading for a week or two. Trust, they say, is worth more than honey. You repeat the phrase to yourself, even as you check your basket twice before every deal. The community invents storage rituals. At harvest, everyone gathers in the storehouse, singing old songs, counting every jar and sack out loud. Nothing is hidden. The youngest children are lifted up to see inside, so there are no secrets. We store together, we survive together, the elders declare. There are jokes. If you can fit in the jar, you get a double share. But the rules are serious. Everyone takes turns guarding the storehouse, and if anything goes missing, the whole village investigates. But even with the best plans, there are lean days. You go to bed a little hungry, dreaming of rain, of the taste of summer fruit, of just one meal with no worries. You remember the old times, wandering, foraging, never knowing if tomorrow would bring feast or famine. The wild was harsh, but at least it was honest. Now you worry about neighbors, about fairness, about the invisible arithmetic of survival. As the months pass, the village changes. The lines in the dirt harden. The best wells are watched more closely. The storehouse is locked tighter. Friendships are tested, yet there are moments of generosity. Someone shares a secret stash. A neighbor helps with the harvest even when their own field is bare. A feast is thrown for a new baby even if the portions are small. You cling to these moments, proof that scarcity hasn't erased kindness. The children learn faster than the adults. They become experts at barter, inventing new currencies, smooth stones, colored shells, a particularly beautiful feather. They settle disputes quickly, knowing that a fight today means no play tomorrow. You marvel at their adaptability and wonder if they'll remember these lessons when they're grown. Every year, there's a moment, a bad storm, a failed crop, a dry well, when you wonder if you'll make it. There are hard decisions. Do you eat the last of the grain, or plant it and risk hunger? Do you share with the family next door, or save for your own? The answers change, but the questions never go away. Yet, in the midst of scarcity, there is resilience. You invent new tools, new recipes, new ways of making do. The community weaves together like a net, sometimes patchy, sometimes strained, but always stronger than you thought. You learn to see beauty in small things. A handful of ripe berries, a cup of cold water, a loaf of bread that lasts the week. You realize, at last, that managing resources isn't just about counting jars or drawing lines. It's about balancing need and generosity, fairness and survival. Today and tomorrow. Some nights you stare at the storehouse ceiling, listening to the snoring of family and livestock, and feel both proud and tired. You're surviving, not just as a person, but as a people. There are setbacks. Someone tries to cheat, gets caught, and is shunned for a week. Another family falls ill, and everyone chips in to help, bringing soup, tending the animals, guarding their store. Old rivalries flare up, then fade. You lose a little faith, then gain it back. It's a cycle, like the seasons. But there are good days too. Rain finally comes, the well fills, the market buzzes with laughter instead of arguments. You share a feast, small but joyful. Children run between houses, sharing bread and jokes. You remember why you chose this life, not for plenty, but for the chance to build something lasting together. One night, as you sit by the dying fire, you count your blessings, however meager. You have shelter, food for tomorrow, people who would notice if you were gone. Scarcity is real, but so is abundance. Abundance of spirit, of community, of hope. You settle down to sleep, knowing the hard days will return, but so will the good ones. You trust just enough that you'll manage, because you always do. Another season turns. The village is a little bigger, a little louder, a little more crowded. Each year, you notice new faces, new babies wrapped in soft linen, new cousins with old family noses. You hear laughter in languages you don't quite understand, brought by visitors and by in-laws. Sometimes you even spot unfamiliar patterns painted on new pots or new styles of braids in children's hair. It creeps up on you. With settlement comes growth, and with growth comes complexity. Your small village, once just a few houses in a bend of the river, is becoming a small society, and small society means new rules. You remember the old days when every rule was unspoken and every decision made around the campfire. Now, with more people and more at stake, rules are everywhere, written in the dust, spoken over dinner, posted by the well. Some make sense. Don't take water before the sun is up. Some are clearly invented to settle old scores. No singing near the goat pen after dark, especially if you're bad at it. And some are just there because nobody can remember when they started. It begins with chores. In the earliest days, you did everything together, pitching in without question. Now there's a schedule. You know who's in charge of sweeping the central path. The oldest kids, always grumbling, who mends the well's bucket, who takes the night watch when the goats are nervous. The first time someone misses their turn, there's a debate, how to punish them, who will fill in, It's not just about laziness. It's about the whole village trusting that work will get done. The rules multiply. You keep a tally of food contributions, water use, tool borrowing. There are agreements about how to handle disputes. First talk, then bring it to the elders. Then if all else fails, let the whole village decide. There are rules for guests. Never leave them hungry. Never let them see the emergency grain stash. For marriages, don't marry your cousin's cousin's cousin. Long story. And even for funerals, who brings the herbs, who tells the first story, who stays up all night to sing. There's a flip side too. The rules bring a sense of order, a strange comfort in knowing what's expected. You know what to do if a fire breaks out, if the river floods, if someone falls ill. You know who will bring help, who will sound the alarm, who will stand by your side. With every new crisis, the rules adapt, sometimes slowly, sometimes in a hurry, but always with a sense that, whatever happens, you're not facing it alone. Ceremony starts to bloom. You invent rituals for everything. First rains, last harvest, new babies, coming of age. Some are solemn, others ridiculous. The annual goat parade is both somehow. Every celebration has its roles. Who sings, who drums, who pours the first cup of honey water. Stories become rules too. You tell the tale of the year the food ran out, how the village survived because everyone pitched in. You repeat the story of the wise woman who settled the great bean dispute. Never ever plant your beans in someone else's shadow. The stories teach what the rules can't, why fairness matters, why greed is dangerous, why it's better to apologize and make amends. The children soak it all up, sometimes mixing story and rule in the same breath. Don't touch the barley jar after sunset, or the ghost of old Terrick will give you nightmares. It works. Nobody touches the jar. There are rules about what you wear. Certain patterns or colors start to mean things. Who is getting married, who is in mourning, who is visiting from another village. You find comfort in the rhythm of repetition, knowing what to wear to a feast, how to greet a guest, when to take off your sandals before entering the elder's house. Justice gets more formal too. Disputes are judged by the elders, but now the process is more elaborate. Both sides must bring witnesses. Sometimes there's a hearing where everyone gathers to listen. The penalty for theft is more than just returning what was taken. Sometimes it means a day's work for the village, or a public apology, or being left out of the next feast. The penalties sting, but they work. People gossip, of course, but you notice that big mistakes are rare, and when they happen, the system holds. You realize there are different kinds of rules. The ones everyone follows, the ones everyone pretends to follow, and the ones everyone breaks quietly, carefully, hoping nobody notices. Sometimes you're all just making it up as you go, improvising, negotiating, learning from each mistake. The rules aren't perfect, but they're a map, a shared agreement about how to move through a complicated world. As the village grows, you see new groups form, bands of friends, clusters of families, the beginnings of what you might one day call factions. There are disagreements, alliances, even early elections where people gather and pick a leader for a season or a year. Sometimes, the chief is just the loudest voice or the best negotiator. Sometimes, it's the person who's solved the most problems or survived the most disasters. The elders grumble, "We didn't need chiefs in my day." But you can see the sense in it. Trade with other villages complicates things further. You need rules for visitors, how long they can stay, what gifts they should bring, how to settle disputes that cross village lines. Marriages between villages require entire new ceremonies, with rules about gifts, dowries, and the number of chickens acceptable for a proper celebration. The correct answer, you find, is always more than last time. When disputes break out between villages, there are rules for making peace, feasts, gifts, shared work. Some nights, as you watch the fire die down, you marvel at how much is held together by a web of agreements. Some spoken, some just understood. You wonder what happens if someone breaks too many rules. What if one day people stop listening, stop caring? For now, at least, the answer is simple. You lean harder on the traditions, invent new rituals, tell the stories a little louder, a little more often. Still, there are struggles. There are people who fall through the cracks, who struggle to keep up, who break the rules because they have no choice or because they feel left out. There are debates about fairness, about how much authority the elders should really have, about whether it's better to forgive or to punish. You realize the rules are always evolving, never finished, just like the village itself. But for all the grumbling, the laughter, the debates, and the drama, there's a kind of peace in knowing that you're part of something bigger than yourself. The rules aren't just about order, they're about belonging, about knowing where you fit in the story. In the quiet moments, as you sweep the path or share a meal with neighbors, you find yourself grateful for the routines, for the certainty, for the web of promises that ties you all together. When you close your eyes at night, you remember the chaos of the wild days, the freedom, the uncertainty, the hunger. Now, you drift to sleep to the familiar hum of voices, the soft snore of your sister's child, the comfort of knowing that tomorrow will be much the same as today. And that's not something you take for granted. You are home for better or worse. And the rules, strange, funny, burdensome as they can be, are the threads that keep the village and your heart from unraveling. It's late in the year when you notice the change. Evenings grow cool, the air turns sharp, and the sun hurries away sooner every night. In the old days, this meant breaking camp and drifting south before the frost could nip your toes. Now, your world is fixed. Your mud walls hold out the chill, your stored grain promises survival, and your family huddles together in the warmth of your home. It should feel safe, but as you listen to the wind rattle the reed door, you can't help but wonder, did we trade something essential for all this security? And if we did, was it a mistake? You lie awake, staring into the dim flicker of the hearth, the old questions circling in your mind. There's so much you've gained since your people settled. No more endless chasing of wild herds. No more desperate hunger when the berries fail. Your children grow up, knowing the taste of bread, the rhythm of seasons, the comfort of a bed that stays in the same place. You've built walls, fences, rules, a network of kin and neighbors, and traditions. Even your bones have learned the geometry of home. But there's an itch, something wild and restless, just beneath the surface. You see it in the way the children run along the edge of the fields, eyes searching the tree line for new wonders. You feel it every time you catch yourself dreaming of a different life, a road not taken. You hear it in the old stories, the ones the elders tell when the moon is bright and the chores are finally done. Stories of hunters, wanderers, wild places. You tell yourself that these are just stories now, but sometimes the longing is as real as hunger. As autumn deepens, the cycle of village life becomes a kind of performance. Each day is measured, predictable. Wake, work, eat, rest over and over. with only small surprises to break the pattern. The harvest comes in and there is joy, pride, even relief, as you count each jar filled, each basket brimming with beans or barley. There are feasts and songs and the comforting sense that this year at least, you'll make it through the cold. Yet, even in celebration, you sense the tension. Everyone is measuring what they have against what they might need, hoping that luck holds, that nothing unexpected spoils the plan. You see how everyone has settled into their roles. The weaver's hands are always busy, the baker's house always warm, the toolmaker always surrounded by curious children. You admire their skill, their dedication, but you can't help but notice the distance that specialization brings. Some families have more, others less. Some opinions carry weight, others barely register. There is pride, and there is envy. The invisible lines grow clearer as the nights grow longer. Still, you find comfort in the rituals, the rules, the ceremonies, the stories you all share. When someone falls ill, the village gathers. When a new child is born, the whole community celebrates. When there is loss, you mourn together, sing together, remember together. The bonds hold, even as the world outside your walls feels more distant with each passing year. But every so often, cracks show. A quarrel over a borrowed tool grows louder than it should. Two families disagree over the boundary of a field, and the entire village is drawn in, forced to pick sides or play peacemaker. Someone is caught hiding grain, just in case, and for days, no one speaks above a whisper. You realize that for all your progress, fear still lurks beneath the surface. Fear of want, of betrayal, of change. One night, you take a walk at the village's edge, past the last fence, into the tall grass that marks where your world ends and the wild begins. The stars are brilliant, the sky impossibly wide. For a moment, you remember what it was like to move through this world with nothing but what you could carry, to low beneath the open sky, to trust that tomorrow would bring something new. You wonder if your ancestors would recognize you now, or if they'd pity you, stuck in your tiny, comfortable world. A fox darts across your path, silent and sleek. You watch it disappear into the darkness, free in a way you can hardly imagine anymore. Part of you aches to follow, to leave behind the burdens of responsibility, the weight of possessions and plans and promises. But you know you won't. You turn back, drawn by the light of home, by the knowledge that there are people who depend on you, and whom you depend on in turn. As winter settles in, the village contracts, draws in on itself. You spend more time indoors, more time with your family, your thought. You listen to the stories of the old days, but you tell new ones too. Stories of what you've built, of kindnesses given and received, of the time the whole village pulled together to save the harvest or rebuild after a storm. You realize that while you may have lost something wild and free, you've gained something else. Community, memory, a sense of purpose that stretches beyond your own life. There are days you wish you could have both, the freedom of the old world and the security of the new. But you know that's not how things work. Choices are made, and consequences follow. You can regret, and you can celebrate. And sometimes you do both at once. In the end, you find yourself grateful, not for the fences or the rules or even the full jars, but for the moments of connection that shine brightest against the long dark nights. The laughter around the fire, the comfort of a familiar song, the steady heartbeat of people who know you, flaws and all, and choose to stand by your side. As the year closes, you gather with the village for the winter festival. There is music, laughter, the sweet smell of roasting roots and bread. The children run in circles. The elders smile, and for a night everyone is content. You look around, see the faces lit by firelight, and know that you belong, not just to a place, but to a story that stretches back to the dawn of time and forward into a future you cannot see. Was settling down a mistake? You may never know for sure. It is both loss and gain, a trade you can't undo. But as you drift to sleep, warm and safe with the voices of your people all around you, you think, maybe this is enough. Maybe for now you can rest. The fire's low, the laughter has faded, and outside your door the night has swallowed the fields in soft darkness. You stretch out, your body heavy, your thoughts slow and drifting. Listen. The wind brushes gently against the reed roof, a lullaby older than any story you know. The village is quiet, tucked in, and at peace, each family folded into its own patch of warmth and memory. You take a slow breath, letting it fill you with the scent of earth and straw and the last sweet hint of roasted roots. Tomorrow's chores will come, but for now, there's nothing left to do. The worries, the arguments, even the endless grind of the days have softened, blurred at the edges like the dream you can feel waiting just beyond your closed eyes. Let your mind wander, maybe to the memory of open hills and wild freedom, or maybe just to the gentle, reassuring pattern of voices, footsteps and laughter that fill the home you've chosen. You have travelled far in every sense, and whether or not you found all the answers, you have found a place to rest. Tonight, let yourself drift, safe and sheltered, cradled by the walls you built and the bonds you keep. Whatever the world brings tomorrow, you are not alone. You are part of something larger, a story still being told, and as the last embers fade, you close your eyes, letting the warmth carry you forward. Sleep well, knowing you have made it through another season. You have earned this peace. Thanks, sweet dreams.